Township of Chesterfield, regular town, 22nd, 1 p.m. Could we all stand for the call the roll? Here.
Here.
Trustee DeMay. Clerk Berry.
Approval of the
A. Approval. Addendum if necessary.
addendum.
Supervisor.
Supported by Supervisor Kirsten.
Thank you. The agenda, I just had a question about the agenda. Specifically, the presentation that we're about to hear involving Six Rivers and the township property, our APO requires us to, APO dealing with board rules, requires us to conduct a public hearing whenever the sale of township property is being considered. And I don't know that we've satisfied that. I don't know if this presentation is inclusive of an offer, or if it, you know, I don't know exactly what it entails, but
Just some background, yes. This is just a presentation. This isn't an offer at this point. Anything that is presented to us tonight, we'll thank them for their presentation and bring it back as a separate agenda item or request based on our APO, which they have been provided and are aware of.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Approval of the agenda. So I have a motion by Clerk Berry, supported by Supervisor Kirsten for 4A for the approval of the agenda as written. Clerk Berry.
Clerk Berry, aye. Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee DeMink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Item 5A, presentation. Clerk Berry, please go ahead.
5A is a presentation from Six Rivers Land Conservancy in partnership with Selfridge Air National Guard Base to propose Chesterfield Township REPI Action and purchase of parcel 0929176001, located east of I-94 and Henning Street, also known as North Lagoons.
I would like to invite Six Rivers to the podium to commence their presentation. Gentlemen, welcome to Chesterfield Township, and along with your contingent.
Thank you so much. I'm not sure that the mic is on.
Red light should come on.
There we go. Look at that. It's rare that people want me to be louder. My name is Chris Bunch. I'm the Executive Director of Six Rivers Land Conservancy, and I'm not sure that we brought a contingent with us. It might be the other way around. But we, of course, are very grateful for the opportunity to work with them and to try and be of service to them. I want to start out just very briefly by thanking you guys and congratulating you again on the Salt River Nature Center. I had an opportunity to talk to the Natural Resources Trust Fund Board last week at their regular meeting and let them know that all of the projects that they had funded, including yours that we worked on, had closed, and they were very excited to hear that and very glad that they'd been able to lend support to a great project like that. So thank you and congratulations. So we're going to talk a little bit today about the REPI project, the Readiness and Environmental Protection program from the Department of Defense. What I'm going to do is have Brian talk about that. Brian Marzolf is our land protection manager. I want to start very briefly by correcting the sentiment that is described in the presentation notice. We're not here to talk about purchasing the land itself. We're here to talk about purchasing a conservation easement on the land, wherein you guys would continue to own the land. The conservation easement would restrict its ultimate use, ensuring that it is not developed beyond a certain level of usage. So Brian's going to talk about that in his presentation, but I want to make sure that everybody is clear that we're talking about a conservation easement here. So I'll let Brian talk, and then we would be glad to answer questions. We have the general and several folks from Selfridge here who can also speak to specifics if we have questions about their role in all of this. So with that, I'll get out of the way and let Brian step up.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening, Supervisor Kirsten and trustees. Thank you for having us here tonight. Well, we'll start with this opening slide. So I think what's great about it is right at the top it shows a partnership. This is a potential for all four of these organizations to work together: Chesterfield Township, Macomb County, Selfridge Air Base, and Six Rivers Land Conservancy. So we have a great potential for a really nice partnership. This view that you're looking at here is the property itself that we're speaking of tonight, and it is from I-94 as you're heading northeast. So just to give you a quick visual of that property as you drive by. So next slide, please. Let's talk about the location, just so everyone's clear on this. So that red arrow at the top, that's pointing to a pretty much triangular piece of property that's bordered by Cotton Road at the top, I-94, and I think 21 Mile toward the bottom there. And as you notice, so that's a 90-acre piece of property. It's already owned by the township. It's vacant. And it's located, as you can see, right in those accident potential zones, which are areas that Selfridge is interested in keeping as clear as possible, obviously to mitigate any accidents that may happen and lessen them. So that's part of this program tonight, and I'll explain that a little bit further. But that's the location of the property that we're speaking of tonight. Next slide, please. So this can be a win-win. It's an opportunity, as I mentioned, to partner with the four of us getting together and really to preserve 90 acres of land in Chesterfield Township. As Mr. Bunch mentioned, there's the Air Force in Selfridge is utilizing a federal grant through the REPI program, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. But in this case, it's to try and keep their runway accident potential zones clear of development as best they can. There's already been a grant awarded through the Department of Defense that will pay up to $675,000 to Chesterfield Township for a conservation easement, which is roughly half the value of that conservation easement, and we plan to raise the money privately to make up the rest of that. But that's for that 90 acres, and Six Rivers would be the holder of that easement. So in this scenario, the township still owns the property, and they can develop it with as they see fit, or you could just leave it natural. But you could have a passive type of use there, nature trails in the future. But as Mr. Bunch mentioned, the easement does include restrictions designed to keep the property pretty much natural in perpetuity, and that's the idea. So how is it another? It's a win-win. The township gains substantial revenue and preserves a valuable natural area, and the Air Force in Selfridge meets one of their goals related to their runways and their flights. So it can be a real win-win situation for all four groups. Next slide, please. So the REPI program, Readiness Environmental Protection Integration Program. Without reading this slide, it's basically the Department of Defense sets aside money, and they make it available to the bases so they can meet some of those goals of making sure that there's compatible uses around their area. And when I talk about compatible uses, this would be one of them, where it's a light use, not a lot of activity. I want to mention here too, when I talked about a passive park, that would be opposite of what they're not looking for would be things like ball diamonds and sports fields, things that are going to gather large crowds. That's really not the compatible because you want to limit the amount of people on the site. So we're really talking about a more natural area, purely natural perhaps, or maybe it has a few nature trails with some benches and things like that. So that's the type of scenario we're looking at. So this REPI program helps the base fund these type of projects that help enhance their operations and meet their goals. Next slide, please. We'll zoom in a little bit here on the property. So that is it in the yellow, and some statistics for the property. I mentioned it's 90 acres. It's surrounded by residential neighborhoods to the south and to the east, I-94 highway to the west and the north. It has pretty good access from pedestrian from the various streets. I see a potential for if there needed to be a small parking lot, there could be access from one of the roads in the area. The characteristics of the property, from what we know about, and we're going to have to do a lot more due diligence to know exactly what the property is, but We know it's a restored former township landfill and lagoon area. It has some lowlands and some wetlands. Tree lined, as I mentioned before. The center area is relatively flat, meadow-like. Again, has some nice uses for maybe some nature trails, opportunities to plant some more trees there for some more shade, which would be great. But again, that passive type of recreational use is a great potential for the property. Next slide, please. You're probably wondering at this point, what's this going to cost the township? And I'd be wondering the same. What's great about it is the grant is going to cover several of these hard costs right up front. So the appraisal work, half by the Air Force, half by Macomb County. They've offered that. The environmental assessment, also half by the Air Force and half by Macomb County Brownfield program. That's where that would come from. And then, of course, due diligence and transaction costs and everything else associated with all the paperwork involved in making this a reality. So those costs are covered. Now, what can the township expect? Probably some costs to review the documents by your township attorney, because there will be some forthcoming documents. You're going to want to review those, of course. And then depending on how you develop the property, if you develop it at all, there could be some maintenance costs. And again, depending on what level of maintenance you set for this particular area would be how much you might expect as a cost. And I'm sure you have some comparable parks now that can help us pull that information in the future. So those would be the potential projected costs in the future. Next slide. We have some next steps. So where would we go from here? We would have a non-binding letter of intent that would make sure to put us all on the same page. You saw some expenses there. The appraisal and the assessment, those are going to cost money, but we all want to be in agreement on this before we really start jumping. Agreements between, it's fairly lengthy. We're going to want some of that. And then, of course, the development of the conservation easement document with Selfridge, Air Force, and Six Rivers, and Chesterfield Township. So that's where your involvement would be more so in terms of the review of those documents. So that's where we're at. Again, a great potential partnership here. That's a brief synopsis of the project. We're happy to answer any questions. Again, we've got representation here from Selfridge. And of course, Chris and I are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you both. Any comments or questions from the board?
While you guys are thinking about that, I want to take you back one slide under the allowable uses. I want to make sure that you saw dog park. That's an allowable use too, and I've heard that that's something that is of interest to the community. So this is a place where we have an opportunity to do that. And of course, I have 2 dogs, and the more people I meet, the better I like my dogs.
Thank you. Clerk Barry.
Thank you. Would you be willing to make this slide presentation available to the township to publish and make available to the public should they want to see this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've got it. Feel free to use it.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. As you know, I provided the APO, which guides, I'm sorry. Trustee Vosberg, I'm sorry. No, I'll finish it if you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and explaining this project. I think it's kind of a great opportunity for us in terms of the land's just been sitting here all this time. And I remember years ago, then Supervisor Ellis took me for a ride as close as we could get onto we couldn't get onto it because of the things that are, those pipes sticking up in the air. But then he was wondering if the county could help perhaps do something in developing it as a park, something passive. It was a park idea the idea was to not bring in big development or anything like that. So here it is, how many years later, and the opportunity's still here. It looks a little different than what he was looking at, but it still, the concept is the very same. So I think it's something that I appreciate you bringing that forward, and I would like to see our board, continue looking into this and seeing what we could do. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Vosberg. Trustee Anderson?
Yeah, I know that Six Rivers handled the 33 acres over on Callens a couple of years ago. It was a 290 $34,000 purchase, and I think Six Rivers, I don't know what the final cost, whatever that your expenditure, around $60,000. I'm looking here. You mentioned a figure, it comes out to $1.35 million, ballpark figure, which you only charge $125,000 to handle it, which is about 10.8% of that. Why, in all due respect, if the township wanted to enter into this type of agreement, why doesn't the township have the finesse to do this without an outside vendor?
Mr. Anderson, would you want me to respond to that, or, because there are some technical components to that question, and so I want to make sure that it's clear.
Yes, please do.
Sure. So, two things. One is that first and foremost, the REPI program requires that the agency accepting and holding the conservation easement either be a unit of government or it be a qualified nonprofit organization. And so in this case, since the unit of government actually owns the land, the unit of government can't give itself a conservation easement on a property that it already owns. So it has to have an outside party. And then the number, the $125,000, is not talking about paying our time and energy for doing this project. It's actually an endowment to go into the bank to provide income on an annual basis that will offset our costs of monitoring and enforcing the terms of the conservation easement. We expect there to be little to no enforcement obligation there because the township's going to continue to own it, and you're going to enter into this with the shared vision of maintaining it as a natural area. But should something arise, should 30 years from now a different township board come in and say, you know what, forget this, we're going to build another stadium, then we would actually have to enforce, we would have to hire lawyers, and we would have to enforce the terms of the conservation easement. So that stewardship endowment that they talk about is the best practice. It's common, and it's actually anticipated and intended by DOD when they do a REPI award for a conservation easement purchase. And the REPI grant only pays 50% of that amount. So we're going to have to come up with the rest of it on our own. And we had not talked about getting it from you guys. We had talked about fundraising externally.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I guess I don't necessarily have any questions for the Six Rivers folks, but a conservation easement is also known as a conservation restriction, and we just heard from Six Rivers the fees that we would pay, which look to be about $200,000 just in the Six Rivers fees, the $30,000, the $10,000 I thought I saw in the slide, and so forth. We put that in the bank so that a third party can tell us where we may be, infringing on the conservation restriction. Why would we need to spend that money in a win-win, as it's described, upwards of $200K, if we wanted to make a passive park without a permanent, limited use of those properties? I would argue also that it is premature to enter into a letter of intent, given that we haven't heard from the owners of this property. The owners of this property have a right to weigh in on what they would like to do with their land, and a permanent conservation restriction certainly limits their ability to develop the land in a way that they may be interested in doing. It is part of our APO, and I think if we haven't learned from past mistakes on what happens when we enter into contracts without hearing from our bosses, it could be problematic. So I'm not sold on this in terms of why we would spend $200K, with the best option being a dog park. We could do that ourselves, minus, and not limit our potential utilization of that land. I've also heard from the planning department there have been inquiries of that land, given the water and sewer infrastructure that is near that land. And so, again, I think ultimately we are obligated to go to our employers. The landowners need to hear and weigh in on this before we went any further, at a minimum. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Chris and Brian, thank you very much for your presentation. There is a lot of information that needs to be presented to the board and that we need to unpack. And I thank you for your presentation tonight. And we will follow our APO as directed and guided and eventually bring it back in the coming weeks to present to the public and get a direction of how we want to proceed with your request. So.
Thank you very much. Can I leave on a parting note here, just clarify a couple of things? So I want to make absolutely clear that there, at this point in time, in the presentation, and maybe we didn't deliver it accurately, but there is no expectation that you would be paying $200,000 for this. Those dollars are coming from outside sources. The Macomb County has already very generously agreed to pay for the appraisal cost and also to pay for the environmental assessment cost. The planning department has offered to help out with the planning process for what's going to happen with the property over time if you wanted to design a park for it. The other monies, the $125,000 stewardship endowment, again, that's not coming from you guys at all. That's coming from other sources. It's coming from Department of Defense, and then it's coming from funds that we raise. We fully expect that there is going to be a public hearing and that we're gonna share this information with the community, and we'll be glad to take their input and feedback. What we're trying to do is to stay focused on the target that's in front of us, which is $675,000 from Department of Defense, a time window for which that money is available, which is, you know, a couple of years, and then to ensure that when we negotiate a conservation easement with the township, that conservation easement provides wide enough latitude for you to plan and develop a park within the confines of what DOD allows for off the end of a runway, so that you've got pretty wide latitude to do, whether it's nature trails or a dog park or, you know, any number of things. But I think Trustee Vosberg talked about it. This project has been percolating for many, many years. Prior to the pandemic, I was at a meeting at McRae, where I spent some time talking to the representative for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about what could be done on this property. So the discussions of this were, you know, have been ongoing for a long, long time. So what we really hope that you'll do is move this forward to a decision point so that we can start to take some actions so that we can get you the information you need to make the next set of decisions. But if the county's going to spend money, they need to see a letter of intent, and they have a time window because that's coming out of their particular budget cycle. So we're looking forward to coming back and doing a public hearing and answering any other questions that arise. And we'll keep trying to move this thing along, provided that you guys would like to make it happen. So thank you and good night.
Thank you, sir. At the end, public comment. This is a presentation. Item 6, department reports. Any department reports? Trustee DeMake.
I have one from Leisure Services. Now hiring and looking for unforgettable seasonal job. Join us at Parks or be instrumental in helping us implement our ever-popular summer day camp program. Earn up to $18 per hour depending on position and qualifications. For more information, apply at Chesterfield Township website at chesterfieldtownship.org. Positions available until filled. Initial interviews will take place the week of March 7th. Next, the Easter Bunny is getting excited to visit with all the children at this year's Bunny Breakfast. Pancakes flips through the air, a chance to meet the bunny in person, an Easter egg hunt, and an outdoor petting farm awaits you and your family. Tickets will sell out early, so register early. Event will be held on Saturday, April 2nd. Breakfast is served at 9, 10, and 11 a.m. Cost is $10 for resident, $15 for non-resident. Reserve your seat today at parks@chesterfieldtownship.org. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor.
Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, just a quick update from the library. As your library liaison, the board met here last week, and on the agenda was a discussion about a potential millage request, and the board has decided to remove any intent of bringing forward a millage request for 2022. They are going to continue to work with the township board and the delegation that supervisor has put together to explore opportunities at with the Anchor Bay School District, as well as the New Baltimore Parks and Rec Department, for some joint use opportunities. And then another interesting matter that came before the library board, and something that might be worth our internal, and I'm not sure where Deputy Director Duchesne is that on this, is the policy in the library having to do with individuals coming into a public space. And there's been a significant uptick. We see them primarily with engaging law enforcement officers in a public space where we have individuals that come in and just record. They may record staff, they may record the building, and it is perfectly legal. So they have, the board has made sure to notify their employees of what happens if you encounter somebody who is simply in the library just documenting and recording a public space. Same thing applies here. This is a public space. There is no privacy associated or expectation of privacy. So I thought it was interesting that the library had kind of taken the lead and drafted a policy to make sure that library employees are aware of the public's right to film in public spaces, and also to make sure that sensitive or private information is not in public view. So coming up to somebody's desk and recording from a public space and capturing private data is something that the library would like staff to be aware of. So great leadership over there in terms of being aware of these policies and procedures, and I was also impressed with their discussion regarding the future of the library and the decision to understand what the public wants before going out for a millage. So that's the library update.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Trustee Anderson.
Thank you. Just a real quick mention here. March 7th, 6:30 p.m. over at our library on Patricia Street will be the first meeting of the Chesterfield Township Historical Society. I'd like to see some our old folks as well as some new people join up and learn the history about our township. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Anderson. Clerk Barry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. From the Elections Department, we've had a couple of calls into the office asking about a special election for state representative that people have heard about. Chesterfield Township is not part of that district. That is in Shelby Township, and that is that other state house district. So Chesterfield Township does not have a special election coming up in March. We are not part of that. Other communities in Macomb County are, but we are not. So clarification there. However, Chesterfield Township will have an election, special election for the to fill the balance of the term of the supervisor's position. Candidates who are, or individuals interested in filing for that primary election in August, packets are now available in the clerk's office in the elections department, and you may obtain those by coming up to the township offices and receiving that informational packet. The deadline for candidates who are interested in filing for that office is April 19th at 4 p.m., and that paperwork is filed here in the clerk's office. If you have any other questions about filing for office, for that office or any other office to be on the ballot in the August primary, please contact the elections department here at the clerk's office, and we can direct you as to what needs to be done depending on the seat that you are interested in running for. Precinct delegates will file their affidavits at the county. That used to be here in the clerk's office. That is no longer the case, and it hasn't been for a couple of cycles now, but some people still call and ask us about precinct delegate paperwork. That paperwork can be obtained from our office, but that filing is done with the county clerk's office. From the clerk's department, Some people are not aware that the clerk's office, in addition to offering passport services, also offers notary services. Notary services are available during regular township business hours at the clerk's office. We've also had questions and calls about garage sale permits. Historically, the clerk's office has been the one to issue garage sale permits, but mid-year last year, we transferred that particular process over to the building department. So if you are looking for a garage sale permit coming up for the spring, please contact the building department and they will be able to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Take it to the departments. Director Johnson.
Good evening, Board. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there are 7 detention ponds that we maintain throughout the township with some agreements. One of them being the Stonehenge detention pond. Over the past few weeks, I've been working over there because the arms that guide those pumps down the guide rail, the bolts that hold it onto the pump have worn away, so the pump is now sitting at the bottom, and we can't get those guides removed because the water is about 18 feet deep. So we've been running for the past about week and a half our 6-inch Jaeger pump, and we rented another pump so we can pump this down with these emergency backup pumps to keep the water down. So we can get it down far enough so we can put a balloon in there and pump that down so we can get these guides moved and get these pumps reseat. Once we get down there, it'll take a few minutes and we'll have it fixed. So this is one of the larger detention ponds in our township, so it's taking a while. The warm weather, while nice, is wreaking havoc on us getting this thing pumped down. So probably another week or so, we're gonna have this thing pumping. So in case you see us at the corner of Donner there at the bend, right by the Veterans Home area there, that's where we'll be. That's what we're doing over there, is working at the retention pond. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Johnson. Deputy Duchesne.
One of the items the township has been publishing recently and continues to develop and expand is a progress at a glance report that's available on the township's website. I just briefly go over it tonight for February. The progress report includes updates and information regarding public engagement, and we continue to encourage the Notify Me subscription, which allows people to log in and have emails, notices given to them regarding various township activities and meetings and other information. We also encourage paperless or cost-free payment programs as such, and there is the connection for the leisure services news, which will take them to areas that they can find interesting information on activities of all sorts involving leisure and recreation services. The report also contains the project management reports, which is an update over certain capital construction projects. For example, in this edition, we report where Peggy Lane Water Main project that was approved in phase 1 has started last year, what its status is. We also continue to show the Jefferson Avenue Water Main project, the 2022 sidewalk gap study that is underway, and the 2022 sidewalk gap program Zone 1 project ahead, and the sidewalk replacement program Zone 2, which are also displayed there, and the regions or the areas of the sidewalk program, how they're labeled and what the number is. We finish up with that section with the Brandenburg Pathway, which is a pathway that would pave the existing gravel pathway through Brandenburg Park in the next construction season. Following that, in building reports, we often see a lot of interest in various media outlets about what's being built here, what's the status of it, when are they going to complete that? Well, the they is usually almost always private construction. And in the building department's report, we highlight in this report the number of permits issued. For example, 5 single-family dwellings were permitted in January, as well as a running chronology of what is taking place on a variety of other private investment projects in the community. Some of that, of course, up here is a little hard to see, but in the copy that's online, you certainly can see that. Another area of emphasis, the township continues to strive ahead on all of our departments regarding monthly service metric dashboards. Which the dashboards are is really a series of measures of meeting objectives and how those objectives are met in a measurable form. Again, we look back at a performance review of 2021 not just simply in numbers and cents, but in what activities, what that encompassed. For example, here we have administrative services, and then we've converted some information provided by the departments. They are included on the next page, which will have the assessing department, the clerk's office. It shows by illustrated graph, a quick visual dashboard of activity, and community development, and public works activities, and leisure services with some additional data, along with the treasurer's office information. The departments are all engaged in working on best presenting information for public consumption. As we say, this is a report at a glance, so there's always a deeper data and information behind these, but they are the dashboard for a quick review. Similar to what the Chesterfield Police Department has been leading and doing, along with the fire department for some time, turning the dashboard out so that people can see performance and activities related to township services and operations in a clear and very informative manner without having to read a lot of bureaucratic jargon or statistics behind it. The statistics behind it are available and can be part of a deeper dive. This is really more in modern public administration. We're looking at doing this more than we are just simply reporting by chronology what has happened in different activities. This actually gives it a little better visual illustration. For example, the fire department monthly statistics, everything from monthly runs by station, inspection volume, training hours by battalion are illustrated here in graphic form for measurement. Thank you.
Thank you, Director DeShane. No other department reports. We'll move to item 7A, the consent agenda. Clerk Berry.
Item 7A, consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered routine by the board and will be enacted in one motion. There is no separate discussion of these items. If discussion of any item is required by a board member, it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Public comments on the consent agenda items are permitted. A, approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of February 8th, 2022. Approval of the payment of bills is submitted by the Finance Department. Approve recommendation by Public Safety Department to pay recurring annual invoice from PowerDMS in the amount of $7,219.60 from GL number 205-301-801-000 and 205-340-801-000, split 50-50 between police and fire departments.
So moved. Motion to approve the consent agenda as read by Trustee Joseph,
Second.
supported by Clerk Berry. Comments from the board? No comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Under Department 101-215-900.000, I guess my question is how ethical and moral is that we continuously keep paying this $400 charge that's on the bill run for JC Media for the clerk. It's a web page that the clerk has. We've got an in-house technology at the township here that can do what we're paying $400. At $400 per year, that's $4,800. That's $4,800 per year that we're using taxpayers' money for this. So we never use taxpayers' money for a candidate to campaign and get their name out there. So we need to kill this on the bill run and stop wasting taxpayer dollars. So I've been up here a minimum probably 8-9 times complaining about this $400 charge. The other question that I have on the bill runs under general administration, and it's 101-248-956.000. And I just want clarification from the supervisor or board member, or maybe the treasurer can answer this. It's listed as miscellaneous on the bill run. It says a Comerica credit card for $50. My best guess, and this is a guess on my end, that that's a late charge. So, and if it is a late charge and we're labeling it as miscellaneous, we need to redo that, because I don't think anything on the bill run should be labeled miscellaneous. We're using tax dollars. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public? No further comments from the public. I have a motion by trustee Joseph, supported by clerk Berry, to approve the consent agenda as read. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye. Item 8A, regular agenda.
Item 8A is a recommendation to allocate the 2022 Community Development Block Grant funding as follows. Chesterfield Senior Programming, $12,350. Care House, $8,400. Turning Point, $1,000. Wigs for Kids, $1,000. And McRest, $1,000. Total CDBG Public Service Funds for 2022, $23,750.
So moved.
Support.
I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee Vosberg, to approve item 8A as read. Excuse me. Any further comments from the board? Just a quick comment from me. Again, I wished, as I said, I wish there was more money we could grant these individuals and these groups that came forward. I think it was well stated by all last week or 2 weeks ago, the importance of the service that they provide. So with that being said, any further comments from the public?
John, Speaker 53978 Connor Drive. I'm in total agreement. These are great organizations that we're donating money. I'm disappointed, though, that we're not able to give Turning Point, Wigs for Kids, and MCREST more money. I guess, you know, with our annual operating deficit of $3.5 million, I can understand why, but I'd like to see in the future to give these organizations more money, and I'm glad that we participate in these programs. They do a tremendous job, and they help out all the communities. Thank you.
Sir, these are restricted funds and they can only be used for this described, so they don't offset budget deficits. So that being said, I have a motion by trustee Demink, supported by trustee A.
Aye.
Joseph. Aye.
Item 8B.
Item 8B is to adopt proclamation number 2022-03 to recognize February as Black History Month. So moved.
Support. Motion by Treasurer Elliott, supported by Supervisor Kirsten. Clerk Berry, would you like to read the proclamation, please, for the record?
To recognize February as Black History Month. Whereas Black History Month dates back to 1926 and observes African American achievements, and whereas Black History Month celebrates the achievements and contributions of African Americans in the United States, and whereas Black History Month's intent is not only to increase the knowledge of Black history in Black communities, but also to spread the issue to American society as a whole. And whereas all members of the nation are affected by Black history because it is a part of American history, which should be celebrated by everyone. And whereas Black History Month has become a symbolic time period in which the appreciation and celebration of African Americans begins every year and continues all year. Now therefore, on this 22nd day of February 2022, and on behalf of the Charter Township of Chesterfield, State of Michigan, the Township Board of Trustees does hereby proclaim the month of February as Black History Month in Chesterfield Township.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. Any further comments from the board? Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Supervisor Kirsten. This proclamation is an important moment in our township. I'd like to thank the supervisor for supporting this agenda item. I've invited a young man here by the name of Gabe, and I see he's come. Gabe is a Chesterfield resident and a freshman at L'Anse Creuse North High School. I'll never forget the day he came over to my house years ago after a tough day at elementary school. He shared his story about how he was deeply hurt by words of discrimination on the playground. What was a compelling moment to me was how Gabe handled that situation. Although he was hurt and it was a moment of anger, at the end of the day, he chose forgiveness instead of bitterness. Gabe, I want to thank you for being an exemplary example for us all to remember to choose forgiveness instead of anger and bitterness. Since that day, your story has never left my heart or my mind. I want to thank you for being the better person on that day and every day, and for joining us today as we acknowledge Black History Month. I have a proclamation here that I would like to give you to take home, and if you don't mind joining me and your family, and also a friend of Chesterfield, Michelle Merriweather, who I'd like to introduce you to, as we hand you that proclamation to go home. Would you be willing to come out and take a picture?
Any further comments from the public, or any comments from the public?
Hello, everyone. Michelle Wilson Merriweather, 52860 Muirfield Drive. I want to thank everyone for this proclamation of Black History Month, and I'd like to celebrate, is it Gabe? Gabe and his family, his outstanding parents, for leading their son in the right way and showing that definitely the next generation understands what needs to be done the proper way in order to bring us together as one. So I wanted to say thank you to that. Most importantly, to the board, as we're continuing to look forward, as we take a look at Black History Month, it's just not the 28 days of the month, it's about every day. How do we impact and implement diversity into everything that we do? How do we seek out organizations and people and different type of companies and things and businesses that we can try to further support to gain diversity in Chesterfield Township as we're moving forward and continuing to get individuals who are diverse into some of our leadership roles in Chesterfield Township, giving them the type of support that they need as well. So I just want to say thank you very much. And I will also challenge you to take a look at Juneteenth now. So you can't just get Black History Month. I need you to take a look at another one too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by Treasurer Elliott, supported by Supervisor Kirsten, to approve the proclamation as stated. Item 8B, Clerk Berry.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8C.
Item 8C is to approve a recommendation by the assessor to contract for appraisal services for a Michigan Tax Tribunal appeal for a cost not to exceed $20,850.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion to approve? Trustee Vosberg,
Support?
Clerk Berry. Forward. Director Bouvet, do you want to address this?
Good evening, thank you. Basically, this is 3 hotels we have under appeal. Typically, it is our job, my job as the assessor, to defend these assessments. I've been working alongside Chris Anderson, our township attorney, to resolve these assessments, the tax tribunal appeals that we have, and they have been challenging. So we have been in negotiations, and my request is to have Integra Appraisal Services approve the ongoing negotiations with the settlement of the appeals of the three hotels we have under appeal.
Thank you. Comments, Trustee Domingue? None?
No, I'm good.
Trustee Jules?
I was just curious, in terms of the vendor, is this something that's in addition to the legal fees associated with the challenge? So our township attorney, in partnership with you, responds to the business, challenge of their taxes, and we don't typically bring in a third party normally. Could you give a little detail?
Yes, typically we would settle before it goes to this point, but our negotiations have been unsuccessful. So I contacted another municipality who they deal with this certain appraiser that I have for Integra, and they specialize in hotel appeals. So I contacted them, and they gave us a price quote. At 4 o'clock today, I have a probable settlement with one of the hotels. So that looks very promising. So the other 2 hotels would be left. If negotiations continue to be unsuccessful, then yes, we would have to retain Colleen from Integra. She came highly recommended from another municipality.
Mr. Supervisor, I guess a follow-up question would be to our attorney. I'm just unfamiliar with the process for challenges made by any business owner, and then the normal protocol, we would always look to negotiate, but what is who is the decision maker in terms of the arbiter, the relief that the challenge is?
These proceedings are before the Michigan Tax Tribunal. There is a tax tribunal judge that's assigned to the file. As Carrie indicated, many of these cases, most of these cases are resolved through negotiations. This involves 3 hotels in the township. These are high-ticket items, plus they're also very unique because they are hotels. Oftentimes, the assessment in these cases is done by sales. So in-house, Carrie can pull files and say, we had 20 sales just like this one, and this is what they went for. The appraisal of hotels is based on a completely different calculation. And in the Michigan Tax Tribunal, you are required, if you are going to proceed to hearing, to submit a written appraisal. If you don't submit a written appraisal, you're out of the box. You cannot proceed essentially to trial. And we have been, Chris Anderson and Carrie have been in negotiations with the attorneys for the 3 hotels. Things were going well, and then as happens in litigation, things go sideways. And while there may or may not be a resolution of one of the 3 hotels, the other 2 are very much going forward to hearing, and we have to have a written appraisal filed with the tribunal by April 4th, or we cannot proceed. So this is one of the rare cases where we have been unable to resolve it, and without an appraisal, we can't proceed.
Can you give an estimate of what the 20,000 or the amount not to exceed 20,000 represents, just ballpark percentage of the dollars at stake here?
I don't, but I can't.
Basically, the amount that the township would stand to lose is $15,000, and that would be going every year forward. So if you look at, if we actually settled for what the petitioner wants, the township dollars would be 15,000 for every year going forward. So basically, when 2008, when the market bottomed out, it took us until 2020 to regain that taxable value. So it would be similar situation, a similar scenario of losing that tax base, and it would take, for instance, if we lost 15,000 right now, it would in 10 years that would be 150,000. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm confusing you more. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely not
Okay.
confusing me. I was curious as to what the dollar amount was in relation to, is there no, and I'm getting deeper than I wanted to, but is there no ability to, obviously 20,000 to save 15,000
I
is
wouldn't
not a
do
good
it.
idea.
Dave,
But you're right. So is there an opportunity without going to 10 years? Is that the timeline that we're talking about 150,000 is what you're saying?
If this was a one and done, and Kerry came to me and said, Bob, we need a $20,000 appraisal to win a $15,000 case, I'd say, we're gonna cut the baby in half for $7,500 and we're gonna forget about it.
Okay.
I'd never recommend spending 20 for 15. I mean, principle doesn't matter on issues like this. It's all about money. But in this particular case, if we prevail in the tax tribunal with the appraiser for 20 and we save 15 this year, that's gonna set the value for next year and the year after and the year after that. As long as those hotels are there, it's gonna set the value. So this is not a one-time incident. This will set the benchmark for every year thereafter. And I think, Carrie, and you speak for yourself, but I think she feels that it's worth spending the 20 and maybe now only 2/3 of that, because we may have resolved the one of them, to be able to set that benchmark on a going forward basis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John, speak up 53978 Connor Drive. One quick question. Can you explain to me why we can't do the written appraisals in-house? And we have to go out to contract this out? Just curious.
I'll defer that to the attorney.
Yeah, because in Michigan, in order to testify, whether it's in a courtroom or it's to testify before the tax tribunal, the expert has to have certain qualifications. If you can't get the expert qualified, they will not be permitted to testify in court. And in this particular case, because it's a hotel, the appraiser that your assessor is recommending has the highest qualifications that you can get in the appraisal industry. And if you're going to go in on a complicated calculation like this, you simply couldn't pull a real estate broker. And I got friends that are brokers, so I'm not, not minimizing brokers, but they don't have the licensure to be able to walk into the tax tribunal to appraise a hotel. You need to get somebody that's got the qualifications to be qualified as an expert and offer expert opinions.
Thank you, Mr. Siebert. Any further comments from the public? Seeing no further comments from the public, I'll bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 8C. Clerk Berry.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye. Item 8D.
Item 8D is to approve the recommendation from the Fire Department to purchase new self-contained breathing apparatus in the amount of $217,706.31 from General Ledger Account Number 205-340-977-000. Selected supplier is Municipal Emergency Services.
So moved.
Motion by Trustee Demink, supported by Trustee Joseph, to approve item 8D. Chief Miller.
Good evening, honorable board members. So the fire department comes before you this evening looking to replace some existing equipment to upgrade with a piece of keystone equipment that we use to provide service to the township. Our breathing apparatus is used for any kind of emergency, obviously from firefighting, but also the potential for hazardous materials and other technical rescues that we respond on. This was taken through a competitive bidding process through Minton. This is a sole provider through MES Services with Scott Aviation, who is the existing breathing apparatus manufacturer that we currently are using, so this will be a new updated version of it which meets all standards and regulations.
Thank you, Chief Miller. Any comments from the board? Trustee Domingue?
Chief, I know we spoke earlier before the meeting. What's the lifespan that usually once we buy this new equipment?
Is designated as about 10 to 15 years on equipment like this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public? Seeing no comments from the public, bring it back up to the board. I have a motion by Trustee Domingue, supported by Trustee Joseph, to approve item 8D. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Domingue.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph. Aye. Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8E. Thank you, Chief Miller. Item 8E.
Item 8E is a recommendation by engineering to approve the 2022 sidewalk replacement program project schedule with a total project cost of $400,000, $300,000 accessible and $100,000 township funded out of GL number 101-446-97000, as well as to approve a budget amendment increase of $300,000 to GL number 101-446-97000 to finance the township accessible costs. Also budget an amendment for an increase in revenues from $70,000 for sidewalk 2021 collections.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Support.
Motion to approve by Treasurer Elliott, supported by Trustee Vosberg. Mr. O'Connor.
Good evening. Jeremy Schroet with Spalding the Decker is here to provide a brief project overview, and then we'll be available to answer any questions.
All right, good evening. Thanks for having me. This is year 2 of the sidewalk the sidewalk replacement program. We were authorized in August of 2021 to go back out for evaluations and run through the program. Since then, we've collected all the evaluations. We sent out the initial notification letter to all the homeowners, just letting them know they do have some defects and what the process is to get those taken care of before we get to the township contractor piece. I know that was one thing that we didn't do last year, and this year we did, so we have that extra level of notification. We've also put together bid plans similar to what we did last year, utilizing the same program, and we've sent those to the township for advertising. I believe they're going to be advertised on Thursday, and then we'll be receiving bids in mid-March. Once we receive bids, we'll send out the public notice, host a public hearing again. At the next available board meeting after that, we'll go through an award to the contractor, assuming everything went well with the public hearing, and then go to construction. So that's a brief overview of where we're headed for year 2.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I have just clarification for my own mind. So it requires a budget amendment increase of the cost of $300,000, but we're anticipating or already know we will be receiving $70,000 more than we thought. So is that a net $230,000? Am I looking at that right?
The 70,000 is from last year's program. So 70,000 was received from last year's program, so that's the revenue that's being recognized. This project is currently estimated at 400,000, of which we estimate 300,000 will be accessible, and 100,000 would be township cost. So it's the 70,000 is for the 2021 sidewalk project. The 400,000 is for the 2022 sidewalk project.
Correct, but that's not an additional 400,000, is it? It's 300? We already put at the budget 100,000, correct?
Correct.
But we see we're going to need 400.
Correct.
And then you're also pointing out that there was a budget amendment for an increase in revenue. That's opposite the 300, the other side of the ledger, so to speak, right? I just wanted to make sure I was understanding
Correct.
that. Okay, thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
Paul Afata, 48055 Mallard. First of all, the books are closed for 2021. They're out for audit. So anything going against that budget it shouldn't be happening. That's primary. Secondary, I have some notes from the hearing we had for the ordinance, and I jotted some notes down, and I still didn't get a straight answer as how Spalding Decker gets funded. And I wrote down here 25% of the project cost. And I don't know how that fits any of our contracts that we have with any of our contractual engineering sources. At 25%, when you look at 400,000, that's $100,000. So somebody tell me I'm wrong, because that's a pretty good chunk of change going into the pockets of the residents and the residents. The residents for the taxes they paid, and the residents are going to pay for the concrete that's going to be poured. Plus, last year, my notes said it was $7.50 a square foot. I'm assuming with inflation, it's probably 10-15% more like everything else is. But I'm really having a problem with this 20 or 25% fee of the total project cost. Somebody explain and tell me I'm wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from the public?
John, speak up, 53978 Connor Drive. Just want to get clarification on that. Trustee Vosberg, a little confusion on what she said, and then there was a yes. My understanding is, by looking at the recommendation, is that we're going to add $300,000. We're doing a budget amendment for $300,000. So in simple terms, are we adding $300,000 to our budget deficit of $3.5 million that we have operating costs now? That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? Trustee Joseph. We'll bring it back to the board.
Thank you. Not to reiterate, this is year 2, so a lot of these things were discussed in the, first go around. But the difficulty I have is the difficulty that one of the presenters raised, which is you go out and we assess the sidewalk for level 5 or 4 or whatever it is that we are assessing as needing to be replaced. So I think last year we did level 5 only, and then there was an option for the homeowner if they so chose to deal with a level 4 or other. But the pass-through, in essence, was the homeowner was billed for the number of deficient slabs that they had, and I'm assuming in some instances there was a finance rate, but the contractor isn't going to accept the finance, the finance plan. So somebody has to pay for the labor, and that amount now addresses what one of the presenters addressed. Nowhere do we have a 25% administrative fee on labor work that is done, especially since we have our own engineer in-house. But that was passed on, in theory, to the homeowner. So the township was sort of like hands-off in terms of negotiating that contract, but the reality is we're paying for it. The township taxpayers pay for it up front, and then there's an assessable value which over a period of years will be returned to the township coffers. But how do we continue to, we've in essence signed up for what will now be, I forgot however many zones we have, 6 or 7 zones. So we have a 7-year contract with a vendor that gives them 6 zones, a 6-year contract with a vendor that gives them 25% of every piece of work that they deem is in need of being repaired. What relationship do we have with any other vendor in the township where we say, you can go out and assess the entire township zone by zone, and whatever you deem at a level 5, you can bill directly to the homeowner, and the township will pay you, and then we'll collect from the homeowner at a rate of 25% of the project cost. What relationship do we have with a vendor any other place in our township? This, by the time it's done, is millions of dollars potentially of work, and it's quite a bill. And again, I don't know why we're paying this bill when we have an in-house engineer and we've broken it out into incremental projects over a 6-year period. And then we're going to just repeat. So it's really, at the end of the 6th zone, we go back to zone 1, because in theory, those level 3s and 4s may have now degraded to a level 5. So it's a 25% contract in perpetuity for a single vendor, and they alone get to decide what is determined to be in need of repair. It's really egregious. I didn't approve it last, and I guess I'll make the same speech every year when we get to this point, but I think we're really, we're asleep at the wheel, and we're allowing our residents, I think, to be fleeced. They're getting hit twice, and it's a 25% fee. We don't have that arrangement with any other vendor. No vendor gets 25% of the total cost of construction in perpetuity. It's a tough one.
Thank you, Trustee Joseph. Any further comments from the board? Seeing no comments from the board and from the public, I have a motion by Treasurer Elliott, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item 8E.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Clerk Barry, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 8F.
Item 8F is to approve a recommendation by engineering to authorize Spalding DeDecker to prepare bidding documents for the 23 Mile Road Sidewalk Gap Project in accordance with the township ordinances. Total project cost is $400,000, $200,000 accessible and $200,000 township funded out of GL number 101-446-970-000. Accompanying this item is a request to approve a budget amendment increase of $200,000 to GL number 101-446-970-000 to finance the township accessible costs.
Do I have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Supported by Supervisor Kirsten. Trustee Vosberg, motion to approve. Mr. O'Connor again.
Good evening again. Jeremy Schroet is here to speak about this project, and then we'll be available to answer any questions.
All right, thanks again. Late last year, we put together a priority plan for the entire town. Looked at all the existing, came up with a of sidewalk. And from the replacement program to follow replacement the sidewalk gap. That's what this is. This is a up with one of the highly in zone 1. And this town crash around on crashes.
Thank you, sir. That map, it was up, I don't.
Yep.
Okay.
So gaps throughout the existing side as you go along, and this is just filling those gaps.
Comments from the board? Trustee Vosberg.
Thank you. I support this. This is the part in front of, that goes along where the Kroger, the Penske Kroger trucking area is. And there's a lot of employees that work there that appear to take the bus to get there. And then sometimes the side of the street's 3 inches of water, so they're walking in the right lane of traffic. It's time that something got done with that for them, and so that they can get to come and by riding their bikes to make sure they keep when they do have the sidewalk it's not cleaned and, on the sidewalk, so, thank you.
Any further comments from the board? Comments from the public?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. Two budget amendments. First one, this one's at 200,000, so now we're at 500,000 for the ninth that we've added to the deficit. So I'm not okay with that. Thank you.
Any further comments from the public?
I think you should check with our Director of Finance, because I don't think she approved this, because you can't spend 2021 funds in 2022. The books get closed on December 31st.
I believe she did approve it. Her name's on the request. Any further comments from the public? Bring it back up to the board. Comments? I'll make some comments. This is a public safety issue, particularly in that area. A majority of our pedestrian fatalities happened in the 23-mile road area. I think this is long overdue. I do not like the cost, like everyone here, but to improve the resident safety and the safety of the people who walk in that area, this is a necessary improvement to the 23-mile and Gratiot area. And also, I received a couple of emails just from residents who do walk that stretch that said thank you, and they appreciate the moving forward with this proposal in the area. Just a quick comment I forgot to make on the last one, on the sidewalk program. We're at about a 36% return rate on what we've put out there so far. So the program, the sidewalk program's functioning as prescribed. It's a little bit above what was anticipated. And again, we will monitor it. We'll monitor it moving forward. And we can pause it and slow it down as we see necessary or see fit. And yes, as was stated by the resident, inflation is a concern. And we did reach out to a local concrete vendor to see what the increase potential could be. And right now, it's something we are going to have to monitor, so we will do that moving forward. I apologize for the long speech. I have a motion by Trustee Vosberg, supported by Supervisor Kirsten, to approve item 8F. Clerk Berry?
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Item 8G.
Item 8G is approval of the Board of Trustees to receive and file the adoption of American Water Works Association as a standard that Chesterfield Township Department of Public Works utilizes for water and sewer department standards.
Motion by Supervisor Kirsten,
Second.
supported by Clerk Berry. Director Johnson, please.
Yes, good evening again. This is just recognizing that Department of Public Works recognizes the American Water Works Association, or AWWA, for our standards. We have done so. I've been here 23 years, and we've been doing it the entire time. It is something that most, if not all, of GLWA members also abide by. It's just a standard that we use. We use the M1 manual for a connection fee study, as well as in the past for previous water rate studies. And we've also used them for making sure proper installation of certain materials like ductile iron pipe or certain HDPE plastic pipe gets installed to proper specifications. AWWA also has a designation of American National Standards, which it follows a strict process requirement, so much so that it indicates compliance with the World Trade Organization Technical Barriers to Trade Code of Good Practice for openness, transparency, impartiality, consensus, relevance, and effectiveness in standards development. So it's a very highly regarded designation throughout the world, and it's also the basis for many ISO standards as well. So it's a very specific and defined standard that we follow, and we're here to recognize this as our standard for department, any installation of any water main or sewer stuff going forward.
Thank you, sir. Comments from the board? Trustee Joseph.
Yeah, I'm just, you know, I don't want to go back through years of work that we did on the Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Board, but one of the issues that I spoke with Supervisor Kirsten about when this agenda item came out, and I know that you were part of the Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Board, and one of the things that we adopted in the sort of handling of pass-throughs, if you will, you know, so a rate increase from Great Lakes Water Authority or the Macomb Drain Intercept, we would, we had enough, we just had, I don't remember how many hours of debate about how that could be captured on the bill. And so, go ahead.
Please.
I was a little confused. I thought you were maybe talking on the next agenda item. If you were not, I apologize for the interruption.
No, that's okay. So in terms of adopting the standards, which I like the idea of getting to what is agreed upon by like the entire world as a great system for commerce. Do you have concerns about bringing this AWWA standard forward and then not being in compliance with how we're structuring our bill now? So the RTS served as a great vehicle to really capture just a pure rate increase without any additional. We were just sort of adding that onto the RTS. But in terms of these standards now, I don't imagine that would be compliant with proper billing. So right out of the gate, if we go to this generally accepted gold standard of consumer confidence and proper billing, do we run afoul of our current billing structure with the way that we currently assess, RTS being the first one?
Yeah, we would not, we would still be in compliance, and actually, that's a great segue, I guess, for the next agenda item, because we'll be using this standard moving forward for any future study that we do regarding any kind of water rate, either methodology or cost of service associated with our rates. That standard would apply. We've done that in the past too. We've used this standard in the past. We're just now recognizing it as such.
So just speaking on agenda item G, you're saying our board adopts the formal use of AWWA standards. We would continue to send out the current bill and be in complete compliance?
AWWA has no setting on how our bill looks. They want to make sure that funds are being appropriated the right way, or we're doing things the right way in that regard. They don't care how the bill looks. That's our perception. We could put one line and then specify on the website if we wanted to. That's nothing to do with, they're not that in-depth, I guess, where it's that specific.
Not so much them from a regulatory standpoint, but
Right.
from a resident coming forth, and we've had residents, come forth and challenge, and they say, if you're using AWWA standards, you can't assess me an RTS on my, irrigation meter or so forth, and then what would be our position? Would be okay?
Well, we'd like to have clarification on what actually our rates, like the residents want to know, what do our rates pay for, what do they go for? And we want to kind of figure that out, what exactly it's going for, and have a nice pie chart similar to what the Treasury Department did with the taxes. It'd be nice to bring it to the board and do a little pie chart that kind of shows where they all go.
Yeah, let's see that pie chart.
We're kind of teetering in the next agenda item, so I'm not sure how much I should say or shouldn't say, but
No, I'm good.
it's kind of blending.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions from the board? Comments from the public? Comments from the public? I have a motion by Supervisor Kirsten, supported by Clerk Berry, to approve item 8G. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye. Trustee Anderson.
No.
Trustee Joseph.
No.
Trustee Demink.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Item 8H.
Item 8H is to approve a recommendation by the Department of Public Works to utilize the services of Hubble, Roth, and Clark, Inc. to complete a water and sewer cost of service fee study at a total cost of $19,650 from GL number 591-441-801000.
Do I have a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Supervisor Kirsten,
Support.
support by Trustee Osberg. Director Johnson again, and we have help today.
Yep. So I have Jamie Burton here with HRC. He'll be doing a brief, quick overview of his scope of work after my comments. So kind of like alluded to in conversing with Trustee Joseph, the goal is to get a definition of where our expenses are going and where, like, so residents want to know where their water rates are going. What are they actually paying for? The goal is to really define and break down what our rates are, what they're doing, how they are helping the residents, and what capacity. Be it operation and maintenance, being it repairs of meters and the radio device, you know, is it keeping sewers clean? It's gonna break down all that and kind of really give a good, clear, defined idea of what the expenses are. And on top of that, we're gonna make sure that the revenues that we bring in are captured and utilized in the proper way for the expenses that we're taking on. So with that, I'm gonna have Jamie go over his proposal.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, Jamie Burton with Hubble, Roth, and Clark. It's good to see you all again. I was here over a year ago or so to talk about the connection fee study, which uses AWWA, and this would be also following those principles. And Trustee Joseph made a statement about, you know, the transparency of a bill, dollars, and where does it go, and the pass-through and whatnot. Kevin was spot on, and the AWWA does not talk about a format of the bill, but a cost of service provides that entire documentation for exactly where all the costs are and what the costs go for, and then maps the revenue to it. It is not a rate study. I think Kevin's, the memos talk about that, but it really is to identify all of those so we can clearly articulate in a transparent manner to every township resident exactly what's coming in and what's going out, more of what's going out, the expense side than necessarily the revenue side, although we'll map the revenues to it. But the fundamental core of a transparent, nonprofit public utility is to collect the cost of service, to provide high-quality water and high-quality sewer services. And that's, I hate equating sewage to pie, because I don't like mixing those two things up. But really, the definition of this is really to establish a pie chart, whether it's online or not, which talks about this is how much costs it takes to deliver a gallon of water or to take a gallon of sewage away. And that fundamentally sets the stage for very transparent and honest conversations about efficiency, honest about what goes through, where it's going. I know a lot of, and I've never looked at your tax bill, but your tax bills routinely have, this is going to the county, this is going to schools, this is going here, this is going there. And this cost of service will dive even further into, namely, that township piece of the pie. Where is all that going? How is that being allocated? How is that being tracked? How are revenues mapped to that? So it's a really great a step and a really great idea. I have found that on the completion of these studies, the public should have a very good handle and very good confidence about what's happening. And if not, that performs, let's go fix it, okay? That's the recommendations to go fix it, to clean it up, to fix it, which would be in the future, okay? Definitely, you get the recommendations, we show the gaps. Sorry, I don't mean to go back to the sidewalk program here at all, but the idea we figure out where those issues are and we make those recommendations for best practices that fit with AWWA and local requirements, local standards. State of Michigan does not take water and sewer rates through the Michigan Public Service Commission, so we also look at those related to litigation and how the courts have dictated that, but we really generally follow the AWWA guidelines to develop that initial cost of service study. So our proposals in your packet, it's very straightforward. Collect data, I equate it to kicking the tires, opening the hood, turning the car over and shaking it out and asking the questions of staff, financial staff, DPW staff. What are these costs? How are they allocated? Every single ledger account, where is it? Why is it? What is it? And then we kind of work our way and map through it. So at the end of the day, you'll get a report, recommendations, and really, I think sets the stage for the conversation of the transparency and efficiencies of your water and sewer department and your water and sewer rates specifically. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or let Kevin.
Thank you, sir. I'll bring it up to the board. Any comments from the board? Trustee Anderson.
Yeah, just no reflection on your department, Kevin, but it seems like Township does a lot of studies, commissions a lot of studies, and quite often we never hear what happens with them. I guess that occupies the empty shelf place for these reports, but I could support this under one circumstance, and sir, you hit a key point. The public should know. I would support this if once a month you came with a short report articulating what you said as far as capturing monies, whatever the profits were, parts and that. Don't expect your PhD thesis on it, but something basic to show that this is an effective instrument that can be and will be utilized. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Joseph.
Just to add on to Trustee Anderson's comments, I agree. We've had a lot of studies in our township, and the idea is that if you're opposed to the study, you're opposed to data, or you're opposed to transparency, or you're opposed to efficiencies. And so it's exactly what Trustee Anderson said. What are you going to do with it? You know, like when do we put the recommendations from an outside vendor into practical application within the township? You know, that's the frustration for being asked to approve another study. We have studies on everything. Supervisor Kirsten, I think we had, I don't know if it was a phaser or a Pazer study where we assessed every piece of, parking lot and roadway, and we did nothing with it, So we assessed what we already knew, which is in a lot of ways the wheels are off over there when it comes to being able to have the resident understand exactly what they're paying for. So you're hitting the great buzzwords for me in terms of the transparency and being able to send a bill that adequately reflects what the product is. But the other piece, which I'm happy that you've touched on in your packet, is the efficiencies. So if you accept a dollar amount that says this is what it costs for township staff, township vehicles, and so forth, and then you plug that into the equation, that really won't capture what we need to do, which is to look at are we spending money wisely in the water department in terms of work hours, vehicles. When we dove into this, and it's been years, but when we dove into this, we discovered very, very basic problems with not even processing equivalent meter rates at the appropriate level. We had tremendous loss of revenue. We had conflicting numbers on the amount of tap-ins that we have. We had holes in our ordinance regarding how we assessed businesses for equivalent meter rates. And so you can't really build on efficiencies and transparencies without that repair. And that to me was the reason for the no vote on the previous agenda item. It just seemed backwards, but I get it. It's kind of dovetails, and it's hard to tell where one begins and the other ends. There's no harm in adopting the standards, but this has to really draw out efficiency challenges in the department, and particularly the one that I thought came out in an overwhelming way was the limited amount of money that we spend on depreciation. And just ballpark math, if you have $100 million of asset underground and it has a 50-year lifespan, you can estimate $2 million a year in just maintaining the structure. And we don't do that. We haven't done that in a long, long time, going back years and years and years. We have a tendency to fix things on an emergency basis, and those are very costly fixes. We don't do a lot of work on a capital improvement on a regular basis, which I think is a part of the efficiency. So I'm curious if the study gets that deep, or we're going to accept numbers that are in place that just don't get challenged. I think Supervisor Kirsten, even the brief discussion that we had, there was some real discrepancies in the amount of infrastructure that we actually have. What's been utilized in our budget for really unchecked for years may not be an accurate, assessment of what we have in the ground.
That's absolutely true, and to go back and correct it is problematic because it's historical and it should have been addressed years ago. You used the number, the value, depreciation value is 76 million on our sewer system.
Yeah.
And when a banker walked in and looked at it, he said, "Are you sure that's not a mistake? That should be 300 million, 76 million?" And there's no answer. And I'll say, I don't mean to interrupt, but.
No, I appreciate the answer, because I guess what I'm looking for, and I think Trustee Anderson is in the same boat, is this study unlike some of the other studies? Because we've, really, those of us who have been opposed to studies in the past are kind of crucified as being anti-data people or anti-numbers people, when it's exactly the opposite. We definitely need to get a handle on transparency and efficiencies in that department. Is it your opinion that this study brings some efficiencies to light and some long overdue areas?
It absolutely does, and the expectations that when we first sat down met exactly. There's the studies that were referenced in an email.
Yeah.
I spent the weekend and read them.
Yeah.
And I tried to educate myself in areas that I've never been familiar with. The white paper, which in closing statements, and I don't want to take it through me.
No, that's, you're answering exactly what.
The closing statement of the white paper document says exactly what we're doing here. We need a study from an outside vendor to come in and look at exactly how, what, and where we spend our money, and how it appears, whether it be on a bill or how it presented to the residents in a transparent manner. It's a problem, and this is just the beginning step of several that have been undertaken in the last few months to fix exactly what has been a point of contention and debate for several years here. And I think that this study is the first step. I think it gives us guidance. It solidifies the data. It corrects, if I can entertain our township attorney, problems that we've been sued over. And we've been exposed on, and fortunately, we've been able to mitigate them, manage them, but Attorney Siebert, I'll defer. We need to get to the bottom of several issues that are historical here that just don't present well. And my hope, and again, this is just the first step. This is just to peel back our operational costs. And we've done that, and I'll continue to move forward with that. And again, no, I don't mean to, if you have to continue, I'll stop. Did I miss anything, Kevin? Jamie, did I miss anything?
Just at the end of this report, there will be a presentation of the board on the findings and everything that goes on, so it will be discussed with the board at the very end. It's like 90 to 120 days, explain the time limit to complete this. We'll present to the board at the end.
Yes, and it will be provided to the public in a transparent and exposed manner, good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent, so. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the public?
Paul Afata, 48055 Mallard. This will probably be the 5th study that I know of. The previous ones more or less failed because the data input for the studies wasn't what it should have been. The data input wasn't correct, and what happens when the data input isn't correct, the output isn't correct. So it went in somebody's round file or went in the filing cabinet. Problem we have right now is we don't have accurate real cost data. We have waste, we have inefficiencies, and we have improper allocation of spending enterprise funds. We have those 3 things right now that should be fixed first before we go into a study, because we don't have data with the correct efficiencies, without having waste, and without misallocation of sewer and water funds. And it's going to be, I won't use the S in and S out, but that's what it's going to be. And when somebody challenges the data, it's not going to be defendable. It's easy to look at your business and your business model and find out why you're bumping in the night. When you look at a gas bill and somebody's putting 28 gallons of gas in their truck every 2 days, when you look at their phone bill and they're spending 500 minutes a month on their phone, and it's 6 miles from one end to the other, this person's driving all day long. He's not making any inspections. And this is all going into the cost of water. And if we don't fix that first, we're just going to have the same thing, and we're going to spend money on a study, and it's not going to resolve the issue. Thank you.
Joe Kadich, 32825 Sutton. Basically, all my career, I've done studies. I worked for Ford Motor Company for 35 years. I'm in favor of this study, but I think it should be the second study. Like Paul says, we don't know what we're doing, whether it's right or wrong. Part of this study should be comparing what we do with the equipment, the valves, the lines, everything out there, how we should operate. I think that's the first place you got to get to. And you can do that by benchmarking. You can go next door to Macomb Township. The reason I'm saying that is I was part of the people that wrote that white paper, and it was ignored by Acciavatti. And part of that white paper assumed, if nothing else, we had talked to the people in the water department, that if they operate right, there should be at least $2 million a year for line replacement. Since that time, I think the only line replacement was last year on 23 Mile Road, which is a $2 million bill. But it wasn't, and here we are 5 years later, and there's not, I think there was $11 or $12 million in the enterprise fund then. Obviously, if we didn't spend that $2 million a year, there should be more in that enterprise fund. It's not there, but we don't know where it went, or why it was spent, or how it was spent. Before you get into this, because all this study tells me is they're going to talk to the water department, say, tell me what you do. And they're going to say, okay, here's what it's costing you. Instead of saying, here's how you should operate. Start from a base that you know where you want to put your cost at, and you can basically look back and say, I justify this cost. And then go from there and say, okay, here's all of the total cost, and here's what our water rate should be. This is where it's getting to, what should we charge for our rate of water? You gotta correct your base, you gotta know what you should be doing, and then do this study. It's not a hard step. Like I said, you can go around to different townships. Macomb Township, 5 years ago when we looked at their water department, they had $33 million in their enterprise fund. They've added lines all over the place. If you've ever gone down 23 Mile Road and down Card Road and everything, they still have $33 million in their enterprise fund. And they operate at the same cost that we do. Their water cost is almost identical to ours. Now, how is that possible? I think it's because they know what the hell they're doing. And I would advise, instead of going this way, set this aside, decide what you want to do as far as how should that operate.
Time's up. Time's up.
You know, it's one of the reasons I sent you a note when you first started.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further comments?
John Speaka, 53978 Connor Drive. I guess, you know, Mr. LaFata and Joe spot on everything said. How many studies are we going to have in this township? It's study after study after study. I'm not opposed to studies. I have no problems with that. I am opposed to throwing a study in the drawer and doing nothing. We had a study done a couple months ago by Plant Moran that we paid $10,700 for, that the supervisor hasn't posted it or even talked about that study. one of the main issues that was brought up in regards to this is, I mean, we have to stop using sewer and water, the enterprise fund, as a slush fund. I mean, if you look at the bill run, I mean, you want to know where the money for the water and sewer, the enterprise money's going, it's right there. I talk about this almost at every other bill run. That's where the money's going. That's why the enterprise fund isn't building up, because the enterprise fund's being used for other things other than sewer and water. Thank you.
Adam Veschek, 47468 Bayside Circle West. At the onset of this, I thought I had a pretty simple observation and a follow-on question, which was basically we employ a department of people who run the DPW, and they have data at their fingertips. Why can't they produce the information that we need? That's become clear with the follow-on comments from the board and public that that's simply not possible because there's a known issue and deficiency in the data that they have to begin with, and possibly well, never mind that. You know, I'm in support of trying to correct this with a study. It seems to me it's more, what is needed is more in line with an audit than a study. An audit is exposing insufficiencies and areas of improvement, whereas, you know, a study is saying, comparing what you're doing now to better practices and how can you improve. It seems like this is kind of needs to be a phased approach, you know, figure out what the real problems are first before you try and fix them. It's a bitter pill to swallow to spend this kind of money to start moving in that direction, but it sounds like it's something definitely that needs to happen. And I would expect, as others have mentioned, this doesn't just get shelved, you know, that there is actionable output from such a study or audit or whatever it may be, and that it's implemented so that in the future, we don't find ourselves in this position again. In the future, we should have the wherewithal within the department and the data and the tools that we keep spending money on improving and purchasing to gather this kind of information. They should be put to use, and delivering those kind of reports to us, the public, the taxpayers, so that we know what that data is. And we don't have to hire third parties to figure it out for us. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments from the board, or public. I'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Just the theme from the public comments, spot on, and I particularly appreciated the open mind that one speaker, our last speaker, talked about when he came in and he saw the agenda item, and then what happened is the erosion of the basic premise that you started out with, looking at the study. It's a very astute observation because it's spot on. It's 100% right. Very early in the board agenda, Chief Miller came forward with his need for tanks. It was a very large expenditure. During my time on the board, I've received and had an opportunity to look at, Supervisor Kirsten, I don't know how many of your requests for whether it be equipment or supplies, whatever it is. Public safety operates in a much different space. The efficiencies are dictated, and they must be accurate, and they're accountable, and there are books and books of, not like APOs like we have, but real policies and procedures that are non-negotiable. And so when you look at the organizational efficiencies, it's much clearer. It aligns with exactly what we heard from the residents who go, how do we not have this in-house in the biggest budget area? The amount of money that comes in through water and sewer is just massive. The short answer is it doesn't, and it hasn't for a long, long time. When we sat down, and Supervisor Kirsten, you're holding probably 6 figures worth of studies, and that white paper concluded with, no matter where you were, the deliberations that took place over the course of months and months and months from experts, and every employee that we had in DPW came in and talked about what they do, was clear that we had efficiency problems and we had structural problems and we had garbage in, garbage out in terms of assessing data. Any study, and our HRC representative, I hope you're taking notes as you hear these comments, because there are some of us who believe a fresh, clean look from an outside person that hasn't been part of, you know, all of the studies in years past is maybe what we need. But there is a real premium on not accepting practices that go on here as okay, this is the baseline. This is what we're going to, you know, measure all of our assessments off of, because it's broken. And some of the fixes are managerial over proper procedures and protocols. What we're doing in a lot of ways is way off, and it's contributed to, I think you can spackle over inefficiencies in a real easy way if you have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars coming into in the form of the enterprise fund. And so when you talk about comparables and other, there are some issues that I don't think were fairly raised in the comparison between Macomb and ours, but certainly I don't think you could argue that it's a tighter run organization, a tighter run department, and the yield for the resident or the water and sewer customers is higher because of that outstanding, you know, management of the department. We cannot simply fix this with an objective study. There needs to be some accompanying management decisions, which are difficult. And Supervisor Kirsten, I don't envy you, because I know in the department that you came from, it was much easier to figure out how to make an assessment of what's broken and then put an action plan together to fix it. So this is like you know, soup sandwich. It's impossible to do with the existing staff we have. They're out actually working on, you know, problems, and we heard, I think, a department report right out of the gate was the Stonehenge detention pond, and you know, you got people out there dealing with the day-to-day operations. I think it might be money, I don't say well spent, but money that is necessary to provide an outside, and HRC hasn't been part of this mess. This is an opportunity for a clean look, but I do agree with Supervisor Treasurer LaFata's comments about the data that we assess needs to be really challenged as a baseline moving forward. So I'm going to support this, and I would ask that the HRC maintain some autonomy from just accepting. We don't need another study that tells us we're not collecting and assessing enough of our residents, that they need to pay more. This can't simply be a mechanism to justify a massive rate increase. We can no longer spackle over inefficiencies by taxing the water and sewer customer. I think we really got to get an honest read on what needs to be fixed. It's a long-term problem. So I thank you, because I know this is a frustrating thing to just hear over and over again when you come in, and your reputation, HRC's reputation, is pretty solid. This isn't anything but exactly what you presented, which is an opportunity to look at greater transparency and efficiency. So I appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any further comments from the board? Just going to make a couple. I lifted up these 7 studies. They're there. They're not filed away. And to be honest with you, from what I read over the weekend, several of the recommendations have been implemented, going all the way back to 2012, 13. The white paper study, the citizens white paper, 6 years old. Several of the recommendations were implemented. And when I say several, just operational changes, the way things were done. So they weren't, from my assessment and looking at them, they weren't discarded. They were changes. What I did find out is that no one can seem to agree on the data. What one person says is numbers, it's discounted immediately by the next party. And there's no consensus. So the goal is HRC sets that baseline, as you referred to. And we have to do this. We have to do this for the residents. This has been going on for years, that even when I was a spectator in the crowd, I remember these discussions. So I think it will serve our purpose moving forward and fit everything that what we need to accomplish as a board and a township to make it open and transparent and obvious to all of our residents what exactly our costs are. So that being said, any further comments from the public? Any further comments from the board? I have a motion by Supervisor Kirsten, supported by Trustee Vosberg, to approve item 8H. Clerk Berry.
Supervisor Kirsten.
Aye.
Trustee Vosberg.
Aye.
Trustee Anderson.
Aye.
Trustee Joseph.
Aye.
Trustee Demink. Treasurer Elliott.
Aye.
Clerk Berry, aye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Item 9, public hearing. There are no public hearings. Item 10, addendums. There are no addendums. Item number 11 is public comments, 5-minute time limit. Public comments will, the clock will start when the speaker begins to speak, and if you would, please identify yourself when you come to the podium.
Paul LaFata, 48055 Malin. I'm going to peel the onion a little bit on Six Rivers. Supervisor Acciavatti tried to peddle 3 pieces of property: the Veterans Park, the Youth Center, and the North Lagoons. The North Lagoons is a part of the puzzle that Selfridge Air National Guard Base wants. And the reason they want it is because they want to move the clear zone on the south end of Selfridge that affects Harrison Township, and they want to push it north into Chesterfield Township and extend the runways according to the environmental impact implementation plan. So selling the lagoons is going to give them another piece of the puzzle to establish their goal of wanting a F-35 in the future. When General Mammon was here 2 board meetings ago, he made a statement that F-16s or F-35s weren't much louder than a F-16. Well, unfortunately, somebody should do some reading and do some research, because decibel values, they're not linear, they're holographic. And when you increase decibels, when you go from 107 to 110, it's 16 times more louder, the pressure on the human ear. So somebody needs to really get some real good data and put it in their head up here and think about what kind of noise they're going to get. And when you're selling off pieces of property that we don't have to, and all the puzzle falls together, and you can't live in your house anymore, just think about that. Is it worth $100,000 or $600,000 so you can't live in your house anymore? But peel the onion. Six Rivers didn't come in here with Selfridge. They have a goal in mind. All that money didn't cut loose. There's not money to fix infrastructure, because what's going to happen is the southern end of our township's going to get, it's all going to be clear zone, so it's going to push growth out to the north. We don't have infrastructure there. We don't have the money. And it's ridiculous. And I don't even know why anybody on the board would even rationalize going into an easement contract so that somebody else is going to say, well, you still have a piece of property, but we're going to manage it for you, and we're going to get a fee for the next God knows long in perpetuity. It's ridiculous. Somebody needs to turn the light bulb up on in their head. And if it's open to environmental, maybe we can get a flock of geese to live there. I'm sure that they'd love that. I'll any of, you know, problem fixed point into the, all you does it take management problem HRC management inside management board members management they're the only ones that can fix internal efficiencies, internal problems, and they're all around. All you have to do is open your eyes. During the summertime, we open up a 4-inch meter and we run water out into the sewer for hours, because what I'm afraid of is we're going to get a water test that's got something wrong with it. But every day or two before we test the water here, we turn the fire hydrant on and we run it for 4 hours. We're going to test and we're going to get some wasting, throwing it money in the resident into the goes right cost. Part of what fixed the water. Like I said, there's a lot that's broken. Nobody's addressing it, and I don't think that study's going to fix it. And HRC did the study for the privilege fees, and they said that they were going to use American Water Works, but they really didn't.
Thank you.
Joe Kadich, 32825 Sutton. Wanted to follow up basically on what Paul was bringing out about leasing or keeping control of the lagoon area, but having Selfridge use it as basically a crash site. Everything that's happened with the advent of the F-35s coming here has been ignored. We tried to, basically Paul and I brought out the idea that you've got a problem with the PFAS coming out the base. When he was here, when the general was here a couple weeks ago, basically went through a dog and pony show, but didn't say that they were going to drop any of the PFAS levels down to what's being run into the Clinton. And despite what Trustee Vosberg says, we don't get all of our water from the Detroit water system out of the Lake Michigan or Lake Huron. There's 2 intakes coming out of the Detroit River. Clinton River goes into Lake St. Clair. Lake St. Clair goes down to the Detroit River. That's why, if you've led the other studies out there, there's parts of Macomb and Oakland County that have PFAS in it. You've got it next door in Harrison Township. You've got it in New Baltimore. Now, you're in a position here to negotiate with the Air Force. I don't know if you're going to get around to having them, you know, extend their runway or anything like that, but you're in a position as to what you can put in there if you're going to sell it to them or give them an option. You're I want the bosses called they put on, they go small extent, and that's believe water. People didn't want to pay any attention to us. You signed up to it. You didn't even have a town hall to let the rest of the township know what was coming so that you could, you know, say, we're going to protect you from this. You ignored it. Out of the 4 of you that were here at the time signed off on that, essentially the letter sending out, we agree to have the F-35s, the sustainability to Selfridge, and the F-35s there. You're probably not going to be here when they do get here, and but I'll hope to hell somebody leaves an address, forwarding address, so the people that are going to hit that area are going to be able to talk to somebody, say, why did you do this to us? You let it happen. We did it without any investigation, and you didn't do it with the public involvement in mind. When they had their public scoping meeting, 2 weeks ago, as to who was going to get the F-35 training center, Selfridge or Ebbings, I listened to that whole thing. Nobody from this whole area that I listened to tonight came in from this area and says, we support the F-35s. I was the only person that talked about Selfridge, and I talked about it, noting the pollution and basically the noise that's coming there. The only other thing that they talked about, only other person that represented or called in about Ebbings, the one thing that they had a query about was the noise level, because apparently their takeoff zone, they go between a hospital and some other public building. And they had a pilot there saying the same thing that the general said. Well, I fly a lot of airplanes, and it didn't seem any louder to me. Well, if you're sitting in a cockpit with a helmet, and ear, and everything else around it, nothing's going to seem louder to you, because the only thing you're going to hear is anything coming over the speakers. Now, if you really entertain going, turning this over this, and I don't know that you can probably stop it, but you sure as hell have the opportunity to do some good for this community as far as the water consideration, and probably as much as you can do with the noise problem that's going to be hitting it too. Thank you.
Good evening, board members and Chesterfield Township residents. My name is John Speak, and I reside at 53978 Connor Drive. At the last board meeting on 2/8/22, Supervisor Kirsten made some outrageous, ridiculous, untruthful, and disingenuous statements in his closing remarks. One of the statements Supervisor Kirsten made was that Chesterfield Township has low-level, disgruntled employees talking to John Spica. I'm very disappointed in you, Brad. Supervisor Kirsten, you talk about personal attacks. What you said and did at the last board meeting was a personal attack on our employees and me. I can handle it, but the employees should stay out of it. Chesterfield has some of the best employees that I have come across. They're hardworking, loyal, and very dedicated to the township. Employees that we have in Chesterfield Township are very few and in between and hard to find. I'm outraged that Supervisor Kirsten made such an idiotic statement. I value our employees. Supervisor Kirsten, one of the main differences between yourself and me is that I consider all township employees an asset, as where you look at township employees as a liability. But here's the real issue, Supervisor Kirsten. Back on October 6th, a resident by the name of John Shabish wrote to The Voice and basically asked you if we had 3 out-of-control renegades on the board that are only self-serving. He was referring to Clerk Berry, Trustee Vosberg, and Treasurer Elliott. Yes, we do have 3 out-of-control renegades with the possibility of a 4th. Supervisor Kirsten, your failure to do your job and reel these 3 in brings us to where we're at today. We now have what is called a hostile work environment in Chesterfield. You have an out-of-control clerk that continues to come and go as she pleases, has been known to use the township credit card to buy a $1.80 Coke. Clerk Berry tried to charge a $200 refrigerator to a bill run for her office, making outrageous claims that someone was tampering with employees' food, has created a hostile work environment to push 2 dedicated, tenured employees out of her department, charges the residents of Chesterfield every month a $400 fee for a political Facebook page that our own in-house technology department can handle, which you support when you approve the bill run. On top of everything else, Clerk Berry is not in the office Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, getting paid over $90,000 a year, a waste of taxpayer money. The clerk makes outrageous claims on her Facebook that she has saved Chesterfield taxpayers over $3 million. But when I asked to show me the proof of the $3 million savings, she goes radio silence. That tells me it's an outright lie. Treasurer Elliott has created a hostile work environment in the treasurer's office. She has even gone as far as pushing out a tenured investment coordinator, deputy treasurer, a 40-year employee, so she can bring a friend of a friend from the county and create a full-time position that doesn't currently exist on the backs of the residents. With an operating budget deficit in Chesterfield of $3.5 million and counting. Now, our current job listing says that we're looking for a full-time assistant treasurer. That position doesn't even exist in Chesterfield, which tells me Treasurer Elliott is back at trying to create jobs for friends of friends for endorsements. Trustee Vosberg, who I refer to as the co-conspirator, is reckless and dangerous to the township. Trustee Vosberg's favorite word at board meetings is germane. Trustee Vosberg, you interrupted Trustee Joseph a minimum twice at the last board meeting. Trustee Joseph had the floor and you weren't even recognized by the chair to speak. When the truth hits home, Trustee Vosberg screams germane. Trustee Vosberg, you are anti-democratic and a fascist in my opinion who believes in authoritarian rule. You do not want to hear an opposing viewpoint from the residents or board members on how money is being spent or wasted. It's your way or the highway. Your main reason why residents have 3 minutes to speak on agenda, you're the main reason why residents have 3 minutes to speak on agenda items versus 5. Trustee Vosberg, you can't handle the truth. Supervisor Kirsten, when will the Plant Moran water study that we paid $10,700 be posted? Supervisor Kirsten, why are you allowing Josh and Mike to take home the new crew cab F-150 trucks, and why are there no Chesterfield logos on these vehicles? Taking these vehicles
Time's up,
home
sir.
is an expense on gas and insurance liability to the Chesterfield residents.
Time's up. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Mike Horton, 50393 Bauer. I wanted to catch them before they left, but I wanted to say a special thank you to Gabe and his family, who not only came here to say, important things, or because of the situation they had, but also I thought it was really incredible to see young individuals willing to stay the entirety of the meeting, or at least up until this point. I don't blame them for leaving if they do, but I find that very, really hopeful that people under the age of voting would be willing to or listen to local governance and be participating in such a function. Something I've been learning a lot recently is the aspects of ancient democracy, and that of a policy, if I butcher this, I'm sorry, but hobulomenos. It is basically this right here, the podium. It is anyone who wishes speaks. It is a practice done in Athenian times, for which the city-state had a body of 6,000 individuals who gathered to vote on issues. That was the government, the polity. It was the aspects of what it meant to be a citizen. And in that concept, we no longer have something like that. We haven't for thousands of years. We have experimented over time, especially within our federated republic, but in due time, we've ceded power away from the ideals of the citizenry towards a continuously divided governmental system that is partly a political class, partly a managerial/administrative state, and ultimately comes into being a disjointed mess that has given rise to demagoguery and to consistent apathy amongst the general populace. What is good for the demos? Nobody knows anymore. And so we are left with a political process that consistently is dealt with across at the local, county, state, federal, even now, as you watch the news, international level. I don't know what any solutions can be for the current time frame, but I think it's about time we go back to our roots, go back to square one, and realize that perhaps the systems we have in place right now have been corrupted to a point. This isn't to say of corruption of people, but rather the systems themselves have internal issues that, when dealt with from external forces, end up with a vehement defense of it. You think back to the movie The Matrix. Anyone plugged in is going to resist anything like that. So when any usage done by citizenry must be done in a proper manner. And then also interesting is that back in the ancient Greek times, there was the idealism of the ostracon, in which case one individual could be selected amongst the populace to be ostracized, to be prevented from being a part of the political process for up to 10 years. Now, we shouldn't have anything like that, but it would be interesting to have something like that. I'm certain there'd be some contention going on in this township for something like that. Lastly, what I want to say is, I hate to use a movie reference for this again, but I am feeling like this is the movie Mean Girls, but instead of the term fetch, it's the F-35. And I'm just going to tell everyone here, the F-35 is not going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen. I am sick and tired of hearing about this program. Selfridge was not picked. If it is in the not too distant future, I am sorry to tell you all this, especially after giving this statement on citizenry, but you're not going to win against the Air Force. If they want it, they will make it happen. But right now, as it is, it's not going to happen. We waste oxygen in the room when we talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further comments from the public? I'll bring it back up to the board. Trustee Anderson, would you like to start tonight?
Thank you. Beginning of the meeting was discussion about the 90-acre North Lagoon. It's currently sits in a pristine condition. It's been there probably I don't know, as long as the township's been around. It's been there. There's a lot of interest in it. We know about, I think we all support Selfridge. But suddenly there is some money coming from the government or whatever, a $675,000 grant, so that they can buy that from our township and put a dog mount or dog walk in there, a couple picnic tables, maybe a path. No ball games though. There's too many people. Or why? Because there may be aircraft issues, crash site. I do believe we need a town hall on this. I wonder how, when the word gets out, what is the true purpose of this lagoon, the use of it by our government. And it's kind enough our county's going to also help pay the cost. Macomb County's going to offset the cost for Chesterfield. What about the residents that live in that area? What's the quality of life for them when they, when this happens? You go to buy a house or sell it. These are just questions. Enough on that one. I am totally in agreement with Mr. Joseph's comments on Spalding, DeDecker, and the sidewalk program that seems to be almost perpetual in nature. And it does have a 25% kick on the residents as it goes in action. I didn't support it when it first came up, and I'll continue not to support it. Final thing, I am total agreement. One of my fellow trustees talked about 23 Mile Road, in need of a sidewalk there. I totally agree with it. When we look at these things, we have to be a little look beyond we need to do it. How are we going to do it? Now, December 14th, we addressed the our budget for 2021. And of course, it is balanced. It is balanced. I don't think anyone should be besmirching anyone, calling liars or anything. In 2017, for example, residents pay for public safety. Residents pay and users pay for their water and sewer fees. These are separate funds. 2017, $170,000 was taken from the police budget, $106,000 roughly from fire, and $204,000 from the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund. They were rolled in an amount of $250,000 was rolled into the general fund. The general fund was not in the arrears, it was balanced. The 2021 budget, I had the same entities. $827,000 was taken out of police or public safety, the water and sewer, and dumped into the general fund. Of course, it's not deficient. Now, the sidewalk issue comes up. What are we doing? Going to go a few hundred more $1,000s in debt. What's going to happen? You know, where's it all going to stop? We can continually, or this board can continually raid these funds for these non-existent things that are being done for your police department, your fire department. They're claiming they can do it cheaper. And they're going to leave a future board really in a hole financially on how to meet the needs of government. That's all I'm going to say on it right now. And I know someone had said, well, if these entities took care of stuff themselves, these administrative fees, whatever you want to call them, inter-fund service transfers, it would cost more for each of those departments to do it themselves instead of the benevolent township to take care of it for them. We've never seen a work product on how do these expenditures that have gone from $200 and some thousand to $800,000 in 4 years pulled out of there into the general fund, which is balanced. Anyhow, with that, I'll wish everybody a good night. Thank you.
Trustee Joseph?
Thank you. Just to start where some of our commenters, peeling the onion, the first comment about peeling the onion, it's again another very astute observation and just spot on awareness into what has been described as vision leadership with vision, the Youth Center and the Lagoon Project, and I was in contact with North. I was at the second scoping meeting, and I don't know. Meeting occurred on a Tuesday, and then the second scoping meeting, which occurred that Thursday, it's about a 2.5-hour meeting, and there was a lot of presenters and a lot of information that came out of that. Some of the supporting documentation, which you could find online and sort of follow along, talked about the potential and the bed down with Selfridge being the #1 alternative to Ebbing. So in each of the sites, there was a timeline associated with the scoping process and the actual placement of the aircraft at either of those installations. The record of decision won't even occur until the spring of 2023. All of the questions regarding the noise and decibel level won't be part of the process until this summer, the summer of 2022. And the other thing that I found very interesting in the comparison of the two sites is that both installations have a list of what they call site-specific criteria and things that must be constructed or in place before the decision can be finally made. It involves the construction of some fairly large buildings, 100,000 plus square feet. of support facilities, two structures to house the F-35 simulator. It will require the construction of aircraft arresting barrier kits. There are calls to expand the runway. The runway, I believe, is a few hundred feet short, although the total runway has sufficient space. The south end of the runway is not ideal because of the angle the aircraft would have to come in to take advantage of the runway on the south. It's easier to extend it to the north. So will these things, will these constructions and these enhancements and the requirements of Selfridge be done on what has arguably been unprecedented, that General Mommen said that once the Air Force makes up their mind, he's never seen them go to the alternative. And then also the same night, a representative from Senator Peters' office was here who estimated the chance of the F-35 being here being less than 5%. So on a less than 5% chance, you see tremendous amounts of activity to acquire land associated with the expansion of an accident potential zone. So while the likelihood of the F-35 not being here, follow the money, because they're putting a lot of resources into a 5% or less possibility. And the troubling thing about it is it's not a matter of just simply saying I support Selfridge. Who doesn't? Who doesn't support the military? Who doesn't support America? Who doesn't support? But politically, it's advantageous just to wave the flag because who cares about decibel levels? It's the sound of freedom. That was a common phrase in all of the presenters and people who called in from Ebbing. And on my scoping, there was actually people from other sites. I think Wisconsin maybe being one of them. And so the idea of comparing a 115 decibel level with a 112 decibel level, it sounds like a very small number. But the reality is that for every 3 decibel increase, you have double the amount of sound. As Paul indicated, it's not a linear scale. It's not just 3 paltry decibel levels. Each 3 decibel levels represent a doubling of the sound. There are some estimates that say tremendous amount of difference between the F-35 and the F-16. And that's a straight comparison, not inclusive of the afterburners. This issue, along with all other issues that come before us, require detail, assessment of detail. And unfortunately, I was a little confused. I love listening to Mr. Wharton. There's a lot of history that he brings to his comments. One was this idea of public discourse and the getting back to square one and having, the ability to be heard. And then the other was stop talking about the F-35 because it's not going to happen. And if it does, the Air Force is going to just jam it in anyway, and you don't have a say in it. That sounds counter to the first part of the discussion where we should get to the public square, and I couldn't capture it all. But the F-35 and the scoping meetings were tremendously enlightening. There is an incredible amount of concern about what happens during the construction phase, if there is a construction phase, as it relates to PFAS. And, a lot of times we get into debates on this board, and I know that there's a push. I wouldn't call somebody a fascist, but there is definitely a push to silence those we disagree with, and then we use rules. There was a lot of talk about the township, the MTA, and the suggestion that this is a business meeting, and the whole interaction with the public is not only not required, it's actually frowned upon in the MTA manual. These are not designed to be town hall meetings where the public is in the deliberative process. So I understand the push to silence, but it's a selective reading of the MTA manual. So I went back and I was looking at some of the things that I recall from my very first training when Trustee Anderson and I were first on the board, and we spent time trying to understand the magnitude of our roles. When you look at that red book, the MTA handbook, it requires that every board member come to the meeting prepared and able to engage in a debate And so when you're talking about rate studies and white papers, I know only because I think I've talked to him about 4 or 5 times for over an hour on each occasion, going over and the supervisor trying to familiarize himself with these studies and the white paper and to get a handle on the overwhelming scope of these things. But if we were to engage in a discussion about equivalent meter charges right now, I don't know what members of the board would be able to actively participate in something like that. If you wanted to have a discussion about nanograms per milliliter as it relates to PFAS contaminants on the base, I don't know that we would have a real solid discussion. I think there are people on the board that just defer to those they idolize, and they accept that as fact with no review of their own, no independent or autonomous review of their own. And that's why I spend time trying to answer questions, because if we're going to apply all of the principles of the MTA and adopt a business-like meeting, we can't yell during somebody else's comments. We can't interrupt one another during somebody else's comments because it's something that we don't like. That is more consistent with this canceling of opposing ideas rather than a deliberation or a counter. The counters historically on this board, when we go south, get personal. They get personal. They're not fact for fact because there's a shortage of understanding of these issues. They're very complex issues, and you have to come prepared. And I don't think we have that in most instances. A couple of agenda items that we had tonight as it relates to the sidewalks. Again, another area where politically astute politicians can say, if you don't support this, you must not support connecting sidewalks. Well, we know if you walk anywhere in this township or talk to anybody in the township, they'll talk about gaps in the sidewalk and problematic, areas with sidewalks. So that seems to be not a contentious issue. The question becomes, how do you pay for it? How do you give one vendor sole exclusionary sort of proprietary right to a project that in the course of its lifetime will be millions of dollars, and they get to bill the customer 25%, and they get to decide what amount of work gets to be done? And then you have people on the board who think, well, that's a great idea. We need connectivity. And some of the members of this board don't even live on streets that have a sidewalk. They're okay to spend your money with connectivity issues, but if you wanted to walk from the Veterans to the historic village, you'd have to traverse a lot of areas with no sidewalks. It seems somewhat hypocritical to me that we can invest in safety. What about the individuals that walk Sugarbush? Are they going to walk on the shoulder and be run over and thrown into the culvert? That safety is not a concern. Those poor people, that's not a concern. So it's a picking and choosing of what we want to apply and when we want to apply it. I can assure you, Mr. Kadich, I'm going to advocate for the requirements in our APO that say anytime we sell township property, we have to talk to the owners first. This idea that I made that statement initially, and it was addressed by the member from Six Rivers who said, oh, this isn't the sale. This is a conservation lease. It's a conservation restriction. We get to pay somebody for the rest of our lives to tell us what we can and can't do with property we own. And you can't put a path, a walking or biking path, you can't put asphalt down there. You could put gravel, maybe, but any kind of permanent path is a no deal. No, because it's really not about, in my opinion, land conservation in so much it's about APZ preservation. And if we don't know what's happening at the base, why would we be so interested in ensuring that it's APZ forever when we don't know the fate of our own township? What we should be aware of is that we have a number of parks that have cost us a lot of money to acquire, and more importantly, upkeep. We don't have the budget for that, but somehow the idea of turning 90 acres of land, which is currently dormant, I mean, there's not much going on out there. We could put a dog park in tomorrow if we wanted to for pretty cheap, but to say goodbye to that without ever talking to the owners or finding out how much it's worth. So we had a lot of numbers tonight, 600,000 and 200,000 will be this, and the grant and the county's kicking in, and then the closing comments. But like, you know, salespeople who tell you that, you know, don't think too long because this deal might not be available tomorrow is a red flag. It's always a red flag to me. I wish we could get away from the name calling, but I do appreciate Mr. Kadich is a car salesman, and anytime anybody comes in and says the deal is only available for this long, you might want to take a look. You might want to take another look at the deal. They shouldn't be that time sensitive. They've been, you know, he was and to a board meeting, business like me. So talking about last, I almost forgot. And I wanted to, and that is that technology providing the service statement was a straight. I simply called Clerk Berry and you know, listened to her. No offense, but it was a trust but verify conversation. So I finished with that, and then I went back and did some additional checking. We really don't have the capability of utilizing IT in the way of social media presence. So it sparked a bigger conversation, and the idea of bringing in somebody that can do that across the board in all departments. I know that Trustee Anderson is working on addressing this by way of either changing our APO or legal opinion. But the reality is we can resolve this, I think, relatively easily, and it warrants talking to one another a little bit more. I was grateful for the phone call, and hopefully we can resolve that. That's all I had, Mr. Supervisor. Thank you.
Sir. Trustee Deming.
A lot of talk's gone on. I'd like to thank Three Rivers for their presentation tonight. Six Rivers, Three Rivers, all right. I mean, somebody corrected me earlier tonight about that too. Okay, Six Rivers. With regards to that lagoon property, that was probably the middle to the late 60s when Chesterfield had no sewers. The first sewers that were put in were gone down Jefferson by Portland Construction. Gold Chef Construction did Gratiot, and the Liggy Construction did Lottie View. I just remember it all because I was sort of around back then. That was before Detroit. So all the sewage lagoons went into the North Lagoons at first. There was 3 ponds there. Then later on, the township bought the property south of 21 from 3 different farmers that owned it. They leased the property for a few years. They eventually bought it. The lagoons then were eventually, once we hooked up with Detroit, the lagoons were emptied, but that all started back in the 60s. So that's how we acquired the property. North Lagoons were first, and then the South Lagoon. So it's been around forever, in the 60s. The second thing is with regards to Selfridge and the runway. Hank, you might have a better memory because you're older than me, but I can remember at one time Rosso Highway was shut down for the base. They could have extended the runway then. Hank, you might remember, it might have been your National Guard days, but I remembered I was young, so we're talking early 60s. Hall Road was shut down for a long period of time. So my thing is, if they wanted to extend the runway, why didn't they do it then? In regards to crash zones, as long as I've lived here, 64 years, I've only known 2 airplane crashes. One, a plane. It was either a cargo plane or a jet. There used to be a windmill at 22 in Gratiot, right across from where the old schoolhouse was. That plane hit that windmill. It was a very large, old-style windmill and crashed in the Brandenburg farm across from my house on 21 Mile Road. That was the one crash. The only other crash I remember, there was a plane, a twin-engine Cessna, if I recall right, coming into Selfridge in bad weather. The lagoons were still in operation on the south end. The pilot came in too low because it was woods after, hit the embankment, and then went up into the trees. So in my recollection, Like I say, the only one because I don't know anybody else that's been here as long as I have except Hank. That's the only two crashes I recall from Selfridge. There might have been some on the base, but outside, that's all I recall. So whether Selfridge will extend it, they haven't done it in this many years. They could have did it back in the 60s when the road was closed, when Rosso was closed. So we'll see what happens then. But that's my comments on that. In regards to Six Rivers, see their presentation. I appreciate it. The 7 of us will have to make a decision up here. Hank, do you have any recollection of that? Any of those things?
Yeah, there was a couple other ones. There was still, since the question, I believe the time you're referring to is still a regular U.S. Air Force base. There might have been reserve components.
Yeah, it was
Now,
before it went A
yeah,
and G.
We used to seem like back in those days, not to knock the regular Air Force, there's a lot of planes falling out of the sky. There was 2 of them back to back where Kmart's at. They landed and skidded. Luckily, there were 2 F-104s or something. Yeah. Came right at 23, and there was a few others too, so.
But, yeah, there weren't
Since
that
the National
many.
Guard's been there, they've been doing a great job.
Wright brothers crashed up there too, didn't they?
Thomas Selfridge, yeah, we named it.
I mean, Hank's got a few years on me, that's why I deflected to him on some of those, but that's what I recall. So wherever we go with this, it'll be interesting. Like I say, Six Rivers, I think it's a good board discussion when the 7 of us can come to an agreement or have an open discussion in a civil tone and see where we're going. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Vosper.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. When I first started out in public service, I was curious about how where we got our drinking water from, and at the time, it came from Saginaw Bay. This part of Macomb County, the northern part of Macomb County, all came from Saginaw Bay. And then the southern part came from Detroit River, and Lake St. Clair, wherever the input pipes were. Now, I have learned since then that there has been, what do they call it, where they circle it around. That we do get, some of our water does get cycled around from south of us. I do stand, Mr. Kadich. I found that out later, so that is true. Thank you. But the majority still comes from Saginaw Bay, but it does get mixed, so that. I want to just talk about the Nature Conservancy, not to beat a dead horse, just to add more to the discussion of it. I've been hearing people talk about selling the property, things like that. We don't sell the property is currently ours. If we were to do a conservancy, the property continues to be ours. One of the first steps that they do with some of that money they're talking about is to get an appraisal to find out what is this property worth, so that we know as a board what it is that we would be negotiating for or against, or perhaps giving up if we put part of this into the Nature Conservancy. Again, I just want to reiterate, it's our property and it would remain our property. The Selfridge would not own it. The money that becomes a conservancy, the reason you give a piece of money to the conservancy, as was explained, is so that they can invest that to have a perpetual fund to deal with issues should they come up. It's a one-time payment. It's not an annual payment. Once we do it, we're done. And I'm familiar with this because the county had a piece of property that it put into the conservancy because it was adjacent to some of the county property by the river and did not want to have that developed. And one of the questions was, well, what would the property owners who lived near the North Lagoon site think? I would think that they would be delighted to know that it would remain in the undeveloped state that it currently is in. That's all I wanted to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. Regarding the lagoon property, I also think that we have a lot of conversation, I see on social media and elsewhere, about not wanting to develop every piece of land in the township. And so this does seem to support that there are some other good questions that the board members have brought up, and I look forward to continuing the discussion. This was a great start, and there was a lot of great information, and I appreciate the clerk for requesting that presentation for us to put on the website and share with the board members. I also want to thank Gabe and his family for coming, and again, as we look at even a child knows, was able to be able to control their emotions and be able to come to a heart of forgiveness. And I think that's a good model for us as adults to look at and not forget as you walk through your days, that even in the most harsh times, that you should remember to forgive. And I am super honored and pleased to be able to say that this board has made a historic move in recognizing Black History Month, and very proud of that moment today. And with that, good night.
Thank you, Treasurer Elliott. Clerk Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor. A couple of points to make tonight. First, with regards to our social media presence, both the clerk's department as well as other departments in the township who have a social media presence. The purpose for a social media presence is to distribute information and promote civic engagement. That isn't my quote, that is from the Michigan Townships Association, and my professional association, the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks, also advocates for that reason, and that is a principle of good governance, and that is, again, to distribute information and promote social engagement. That is why we do it, and that's the purpose for it. And as many of you know, for years now that I've been on the board, I've always advocated for the highest quality of service at the lowest possible cost. That's always been my goal in any thing I choose to do. So in my attempt to distribute information and promote civic engagement, I chose to engage a vendor because I believe that is where we get the highest quality of service at the lowest possible cost. It achieves both of those objectives. This particular vendor that was chosen is monitoring and managing activity, as well as posting and creating content 365 days a year at an approximate cost of $13 a day. Not only do we not have the capability in-house to do that, but certainly not for that price. And as a result, what we have seen is ever since we have begun the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and so forth, we have seen an increase of 24% approximately every month, and it routinely outperforms our main page. So the clerk's page alone sees an increase of about 24% a month of civic engagement, where we have social media engagement from the public. We've had nearly a 100% improvement and an increase in the last couple of weeks, reaching approximately 12,400 individual separate accounts that have received our messages as well as engaged with us. As we have begun to promote our YouTube channel, where residents, members of the public can see everything that's going on in their government, we've facilitated approximately 150 visits to that channel and approximately 45 to 65 new subscribers. So if our goal is in fact distributing information and promoting civic engagement, which is a widely accepted principle of good governance, then I believe we're accomplishing that goal. And in fact, we're doing it at a cost that is incredibly reasonable, and there is no way that we could do that in-house for that cost. So I believe we're achieving the goal, and I believe we're doing it in a fiscally sound way. A couple of other things about, most people note that today is a palindrome, right? It's 2/22 of 22, but a number of other significant things happened today in history, and this particularly pertains to the United States of America. In 1980, on this day, the United States men's ice hockey team defeated the Soviets at Lake Placid. And that is often cited as a point in time when we were all Americans that day. We were all proud to be Americans. And I wanted to point that out because, as many of you know, I'm an avid ice hockey fan. I have a lot of friends that are either current or former professional players and play at all levels. And I know many of even our board members here are active in ice hockey. And Trustee Anderson told me he used to play, and I know that Trustee Vosberg has several grandchildren who are tremendous hockey players. And so it's a significant day today for America, but also with regards to Black history. In the sport of ice hockey, we actually have a very significant parallel to make here, and that is most people consider the first professional player in the NHL, in the National Hockey League, to be Willie O'Ree in 1958. However, he was a Canadian-born. The first American-born African-American who was exclusively trained in the United States and played in the National Hockey League was Mike Grier, who was born in Detroit. So the first African-American fully born and trained professional hockey player came from right here in Detroit, right here in Michigan. And I think that's something to be very proud of and something notable. So some great things to note today, and I hope that we've provided some clarification here. I've provided some clarification with regards to a comment on the agenda item. I appreciate Trustee Joseph for calling and asking the questions. You know, that's one thing, is that, you know, Trustee Joseph and I may have, and other members may have disagreements over things over time, but I have to give Trustee Joseph credit because he has always called me and asked questions and had a conversation with me. So I want to thank you for that, Trustee Joseph, and you know, my door is always open, and one thing's for sure, Dave and I always find a way to communicate. It's not in many ways, and so I thank you for that, because that means that your board is working for you, your government is working for you, and we're happy to, very happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Berry. I'll try and make it quick here. I want to reset the land request from Six Rivers. That is a resurrection of a discussion that began back in 2000, I believe it was in 18, and they resurrected that conversation and asked to present tonight. I will guarantee you that any discussion or any moving forward with any requests from Six Rivers will be presented here at the board. You will get all documents. In fact, because of tonight, we're already working on compiling all those historical documents related to that property, so you can have a complete history of, I don't know if it's going to include a plane crash on it, but we'll dig and see if we can find a news article for you to at least have in a package. Thank you for the HRC study. Again, I think that is that's at least the first step in correcting a lot of historical conflicts and questioning of data that wasn't done in the past, and I think you'll be, I think we will be satisfied once that study is done, and it will lay the foundation for several issues that we are currently managing within the Water and Sewer Department. Comment was made, growth. They want to move growth to the north. Well, growth is already here. If you haven't noticed, go up the 26 Mile Road, there is a hospital being built. Hospital is being built, and they don't care that there's not sewer there. And I just say they don't care. They're going to put an on-site sewer treatment plant. I've never been able to come to an understanding of why a municipality puts in water systems but fails to put sewer underneath it. So that's, again, another learning curve I'm trying to catch up on. It was made a comment that we're not rational. No, we are rational, and particularly the day-to-day operation of the township. That's what we do. We sit back and we make rational decisions based on facts and data that are presented to us. Just because you're not happy with it or you don't like the end result doesn't make it irrational. That's my perspective, particularly being the supervisor and leading this township day to day. My perspective is not yours. And I get to choose what my perspective is, just like you get to choose yours. One of them being, which was again mentioned tonight, is the fire hydrant out front. And we have a closed system that brings water to this township. We are working on a solution for that. That was already addressed, and the engineer is looking at it to see what we can do to remove that. The funny thing is, that's another historical event that was placed here that all of a sudden became a problem or a point of concern. Wasn't addressed by the previous board, wasn't addressed when this building was built. But all of a sudden now it's a conflict or it's a problem, and it's brought up and said nothing is being done about it. Well, yes, something is being done about it. We're trying to come up with a solution for it. But this will be the backside of it. Guess what that solution takes? Money. Money that if I present it to the board becomes a budgetary problem because no one ever put it in a capital plan. No one ever thought about it. But they bring it to the podium and they try and make political fodder of it. And again, not politics, it's posturing. I don't even know, Mr. Speaker, it's not even worth responding to. Again, this word was used. Management of employees. You know what? Employees here are being managed. Some of them don't like it. Some of them have problems with it and they become disgruntled. Comments made about driving around using gas money, using gas and putting mileage on vehicles. Well, we've addressed that. Yes, those TVs, they're not TVs, sir. Those track the vehicles, real time, all the dynamics of the vehicle, and they're monitored by management. That's something that was instituted recently. Reduction of the fleet underway. Several vehicles in our inventory, unused, sitting dormant, being removed. Again, management. Certain employees don't like that approach. It's true, they don't. They don't like being managed. There are elements of employees in all organizations that don't like being managed. Let me make it very clear to you. Every employee in this township since I've started here is a dedicated employee. Some of them do not like being managed, but they will be managed. Every employee's objective here is very clear from me from the day I walked in and took this seat. Your daily objective for every employee here is to serve the residents of this township, period. And to accomplish the objectives the board sets forth in this township. That's it. And when a disgruntled employee doesn't funnel documents out the back door that an individual can speak of at a podium and put their own little twist on it, well, that's in violation of the law. And if I find that happening, that employee or group of employees will face the discipline and consequences. You speak to, Mr. Speaker, coming to the podium and asking for documents. Well, there's this law called FOIA. And again, it's available to you. Come to the counter and make a FOIA request. Don't look for the employee to hand it to you out the back door. Again, it's illegal. I have to, you attack people's character. You don't know me. You met me for an hour and a half in my office. You have no clue who I am. Just like I don't know who you are. But by the conversations made at the counter, you like to attack people at the podium. You like to attack people. That's all you do. You offer no solution. And honestly, I don't think I would take it anymore if you did come to the podium with a solution. It'd be highly suspect. Just because you're a podium engineer, a podium manager, by some accounts, it sounds like you're an employee and you know these individuals personally because at the last meeting you did recite employee names. Again, I'm going down a road that I shouldn't be going down, and I regret that when I say things, because that's not what this position is about. This position is about leading this township, providing documentation, openness, transparency, and making the best decisions possible for this community. And it will be in conjunction with full disclosure to this board, and that's how I will continue moving forward in this position. And with that being said, I appreciate everyone attending tonight. I will take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Trustee Dominguez, supported by Trustee Vosberg. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting's adjourned, 10 p.m.